We're good.
Right. Well, it is good to be together today. It's been a little while since we met. Having July off always makes me look forward a little bit more than usual for our assessment director meetings in August. And we've got a full slide deck, as you've seen. We'll go ahead and get started with our meeting today. You'll see we'd like to remind ourselves and everyone in the meeting what our learning intentions are. That our goal is to support you as assessment directors with your responsibilities around assessments and related data, provide guidance on information on assessment, laws and policies, assessment administration, and assessment literacy. And that's what we try to do when we get opportunity to use some of your time to get together. Let's go to the next slide. Kim, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. Just as a reminder, for new assessment directors, our new assessment directors meeting is going to be held starting at 12:30. Following, it gives everybody about 30 minutes so you can have some lunch and take care of anything you need to look at really quick. We will send a new link out for that meeting, right, Amy? I think you have a new link, right, for the new assessment directors meeting, I think, or is it the same one?
I will.
I can't remember because we put it in the agenda for the meeting. Well, if nothing else, either that or we'll keep the same one. Anyway, there will be a link. We'll be sending it out, and we just want you to be aware that we understand if you're brand new and you haven't really done much with assessment, some of the stuff you're going to hear for the next 3 hours could be a little bit confusing, or you might be a little frustrated. Make sure you jot down any questions that you have that you think wouldn't be applicable for the whole group. I mean, if it's an honest, like, when does rostering occur or something like that? Those kind of questions everybody needs to know. But if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not sure if that's a question I want to ask everyone, or type in the chat, feel free to just jot it down. And when we meet again at 12:30, we'll be happy to start addressing those questions. The meeting this afternoon is not a complete repeat of everything you're going to see today. We added, the one reason our meeting today is pretty long is we added some information that a lot of more experienced or our current ADs would know about. But rather than trying to cover everything in 8 million memos, we decided to put a bunch of stuff in this morning with support this afternoon. So unlike other new AD meetings where we just told you about every single assessment and talked at you, this one will be a little bit more interactive with tell us what you need to know. We do have some slides to show you to kind of trigger memory, or, like I have a question and, oh, that's what I wanted to ask about. So feel free to join us. I don't think it's going to be 3 hours unless we have tons of people with lots and lots of questions. So those of you who are concerned about schedules, because I know, there's a whole bunch of people in this room who's started school like in the last 2 days. So, and that's the main thing is, and as always, please feel free to type any questions you have in the chat. We are monitoring it, or get brave and pop off mute, and we'll happily answer the questions during the meeting. So.
Okay, thank you, Kim. All right, I usually like to start meetings with either some kind of a thought that's inspired me, or meant something to me during the previous month. Sometimes I've had short videos. This one, I'm not going to play the video. It's a 12-minute introduction to the Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. But this is a book that I've read when I was an administrator at the school level. It made a significant difference for me. I continue at this time to implement some of the practices that he recommends, that author. So at some future time, I encourage you to watch the short video clip and consider adding this book to one of your reading lists. What I do want to do, though, it won't take too long, is I've got a short Kahoot quiz. Try this we've got new technology here in the boardroom, so I trained on it just before this meeting. Let's see if I do. Okay. Now, since I used Kahoot a long time ago, there's been some changes, including a 40-person limit if you have a free license. So not everyone on this call is going to be able to join, but the first 40 who use this PIN number, we'll wait for a minute to get you in, and the rest of us, we can try to answer the questions on our own. And I'm using this as a review, opportunity to review some changes that the board has made with their policies over the last several months. Rather than just talk about the policies themselves, I'll highlight a couple of elements that will be important for you and your colleagues, your communities to understand as we move into this new year.
Do that.
You laughing at some of the nicknames?
Yeah, it's
Grinch.
like there's some stories to be told here.
Do that. There's a name that comes from a blast from the past.
Copperpot, isn't that penguin?
It's from
or
Batman, yeah. Oswald
Cobblepot's from
Batman, yeah.
I'm gonna wait a minute longer in case there's anyone else. The fun part of Cahoots is it does create a leaderboard. At least one person in this meeting will get reinforced. Star Wars reference.
That's not me, by the way. That can't stop me. I'm not taking a spot.
Okay, wait 10 more seconds, and then I'm gonna start. Okay. Again, if you're not in the game, just go ahead and you'll see the questions and the prompts for answers, and see if you can answer the questions as well. I think I've set the timer at 10 seconds per question, so you have to be pretty quick to respond to these. I should read these for those of us who are here. So this is about exiting springboard status. As you know, there's been some changes because of the rule or the law that was passed last year to remove overall ratings for schools. The boards had to go back in and make some changes. And you'll see here, reduce the gap by 1/3 between their baseline and 55% of the total. Again, just a point of this question is just to bring to everyone's awareness that there was a change made to this rule, and the schools that you have that are impacted by this, they want to have a little bit of a refresher on those changes. K-12, right? And if you have a favorite, those of us who aren't in it, you're rooting for. To qualify for TSI designation, a high school must be in the lowest 3% of all schools in the school accountability ranking, not have any region championship teams for 5 years, be in the lowest 5% of all schools in the school accountability ranking, have a percentage of points that is equal to or lower than 38% for 2 consecutive years. Yeah, so again, the change to the rule didn't change the threshold at all, but because we don't have overall school ratings anymore, it used to reference letter grades. And you'll see here that the changes something you want to look at or have your school district.
Aaron?
Yes.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
TSI is an identification for student groups. So it is student groups who are below the Title I 5% threshold for 2 consecutive years. So you could be identified for special ed students, EL students, and white students, both race ethnicity categories for those subgroups.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. It limited the amount of text I can put in the responses.
Of course.
So I appreciate
It's not
that.
easy to explain either, so I get it.
Okay. For false, when the 2023 school report cards are released, each school will have an overall rating. This is the easiest of those because we've talked about the legislation that removed this requirement. But I just wanted to make sure. I think sometimes it's hard to forget things. Those things that used to be true. You've heard the phrase maybe of it's important to unlearn. I think this is an example of that.
Copperpot's getting an
A student earns full point for the growth indicator of the school accountability system if they have an SGP that is equal to or higher than 80, They have an SGP that is equal to or higher than 60. They earned an A in their English class, or it's too complicated to know. This question is related to the amendment to the Utah Consolidated application that was submitted last January. We're still waiting for an official response to. The correct question is to have an SGP that is equal to or higher than 80. Student growth targets then is what this references, and when we get official notification of that change, it'll formally go into effect. And the way student growth targets are calculated will change. Okay. (53G6803) requires an LEA to reasonably accommodate a parent's request to request a teacher, retain their child, excuse their child from an assessment, all of the above. This is known as the parental rights legislation. This past legislative session, there was additional bills passed about right of conscience. This is still referencing the previous code that is still in effect. And all of the above is correct. The reason I put this on here is there's a practice in our LEAs to notify parents about their right to exclude their child from assessment. It's important to know that there's a list of things the parent needs to be notified about, not just their right to exclude their child from an assessment. And our last question, the free version made it difficult to make this question work right. Copper pots back at the top. The recent audit on data reliability included which of the following recommendations? Mark all that apply. I think it won't actually allow you to mark all that apply. Consider implementing tests with limited manual scoring and input. Assess compliance objectives for alignment and necessity. Discontinue state assessment. Monitor LEA compliance with objectives to improve effectiveness. And A, red, blue, and green are all correct. Those three recommendations came out of that audit. We'll be spending time talking about that in future meetings, including with our Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee. But I just wanted to make you aware of that audit. Some of you on this call were interviewed and participated in that audit. I know that the report mentions, not LEAs by name, but it mentions comments that they've received from LEAs. See who our winner was? Grinch snuck up.
Who is it?
Yeah, I think we
He's
need to
brave
reveal.
enough to tell us who they are. Type it in the chat.
Yeah, if anybody wants to take credit for being the Grinch, we'd love to recognize you. Okay. Okay, so this is the August board meeting, Standard Assessment Committee, which is actually being held this coming Tuesday morning. They were not able to meet because of conflicts with many of their committee members on the regularly scheduled time, so they'll meet Tuesday morning. Those first three rules are all related to the same topic, and that is what to do about the kindergarten assessment. Key. Should we, and we talked about this, we actually surveyed this group last, probably would have been October. Literacy directors were surveyed, and the board's been in discussions about that ever since. And during the legislative session, the code was changed to take the word kindergarten entry exit profile, that phrase, out of the code. The board is still required to test kindergarten students, but they get to decide what that test is now. So they'll be discussing whether to keep the keep, rely on the Acadians benchmark rating for the kindergarten assessment and just continue to keep, or rely on the kindergarten or the Acadians benchmark and did I say discontinue the first one? Keep the keep as an optional assessment. Because the state board owns those resources, we could continue to provide that to LEAs.
Is this written down to what the options are that you're going to weigh in on?
It's in there in the memo, in the board documents. We'll share.
Does that include survey results that we can look at? Is that public now?
Yes, that's in the board backup. We'll have some of our team will be presenting. Teresa McIntyre will be presenting, and then we'll have literacy staff will be presenting. Surveys are really split. about 50-50. It's not exactly that, but it's about a 50-50 split, and I expect it'll be challenging for the board.
What was the split between?
The keep or
The
cadence benchmark. There were some that wanted both, but that was a pretty small number. But you had a portion of the LEAs say keep. It's they list their reasons. And then you have a little bit larger number. It's pretty close to say let's move to the Acadians benchmark reading and math for their assessment. That will affect, you'll see multiple rules up there, because that'll affect pupil accounting. If you remember, kindergarten students right now, kindergarten classes are allowed to have 12 days that they're not required to attend class in order to complete assessment. If the board moves to the Acadians benchmark assessments, it's likely they would make modifications at least to those number of days, perhaps eliminate all 12 of those days for assessment. So that's a big issue that they'll be discussing in committee meeting this coming Tuesday morning. You have strong feelings. If your LEA has strong feelings, you'd want to reach out to the committee members for the board that are on that, or attend the meeting and sign up for public comment would be another way to get involved, provide input. One of the things that was the most interesting to me as I transitioned from working in a district to the state board, to see how impactful sometimes one voice can be, especially in a committee meeting like this. During my almost 6 years here now, I've seen multiple times where it felt to me like one single voice comment in a committee meeting shifted the momentum of a decision. So again, I would encourage you, if you have strong feelings, to sign up for public comment. And then legislative preparation. We've been tracking the board. They're identifying what their top funding priorities are. They talked about that in their last meeting, and they'll be trying to finalize those at their September board meeting, as well as policy recommendations for the state legislature. And then the change to the TSSA rule, that again is just a simple necessity to update it with the elimination of overall school ratings. That made it through committee this last meeting, and then we'll go before the full board in September. I'll pause for a minute. Any questions on those? Again, the chat feature, or if you want to unmute. Okay. These were recently completed, and these two rules are the ones that the majority of those quiz questions we just covered come from. So if you'd like to get more details, look at 497 for the school accountability, which is where you'd see the growth, calculation of growth score, and then 920 is where you would find the information about the school designations for accountability. Canadians mathematics amendment we're working on. We just missed the deadline back in June. Now we're working on finding funding for that. I don't know if somebody's scheduled to talk about that a little bit more coming up. The gist of that amendment is to try to improve or increase the amount of technology that can be used to support that assessment. And then the parental exclusion forms were recently adopted by the board, most recent board meeting. We separated them into two separate forms because they're getting pretty long, elementary and secondary. And they're available on our website, I believe now, both in English and Spanish.
Not in Spanish yet, they're still being
Not
translated.
Spanish yet.
Still being translated.
English now, Spanish is well. The debate on that was very interesting, though.
Sorry to interrupt. Just quickly back to the school accountability. Has the technical manual been updated to reflect all those changes?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ann Michelle, I think she's going to talk about this in detail later on in our meeting, but the answer would be yes, I think, short answer.
Yeah, the one that is currently published does not have these new ones, but I'm working on a new version that will be ready pretty soon. Yeah, I want to get this clear and on paper out for you quickly.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, I think, for each of you as well, as we announced recommended amendments back in, well, we did public comment back in November of 2022, submitted in January of 23, and we've had a lot of questions, especially around the EL, changes to the EL exit criteria, and we've just been, a lot of dialogue back and forth with the U.S. Department of Education about that, so we haven't received a formal written acceptance of our nominations, but we're moving forward because we received a verbal acknowledgement that they're going to approve them. because there's an area of risk for the state board we're in right now, because it's the dilemma was, do we go forward with the old one, but then when the changes get made, that becomes public, and then it confuses people. Why don't you implement this until, or are you not implement this till next year? And so that it's put a freeze on a lot of people here on their work.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work that goes into those program and technical manuals. I get a lot of miles out of those. Thank you.
Yeah, I lean into them a lot as well. The parental exclusion forms discussion was very interesting, and the full board with this. It went in directions I had not anticipated. I mentioned earlier that there's the reminder of the right of conscience bill, that basically a student can exclude themselves from any activity. So during this discussion, there was a time when the board was starting to consider eliminating the parental exclusion form with the rationale that the student can exclude themselves anytime they want it at all, so why would you have a form for it? I believe sounder minds prevailed. That's opinion, my opinion, but the board decided it was better to keep order around assessment, and that the statute that requires the parental exclusion form is still in effect. Angie Stallings reminded the board that typically when you have statutes that might look like they conflict with one another, the one that provides the most specificity typically holds the day.
There is a question online. Will there be time in an upcoming AD meeting that those changes for both R277, 497, and 920 will be discussed in detail?
Future board meeting?
Sure. AD meeting.
Oh, AD meeting. Yes, yes, we can do that. And Michelle would love to take that on probably next month. Would you commit to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Future items that aren't scheduled yet. The Acadians Reading RFP is released. We're in the process of preparing for the scoring of those responses. And then that decision, once that's made, we'll roll that out. The contract will obviously need to be signed. We hope that we're on a runway that gives us enough time that if there are changes for the vendors, that we can provide strong support for professional learning. If there aren't changes to the vendors, then there'll just be time that it'll be nice to bring peace of mind to people's work. And then last legislative session, there was a requirement for us to submit a waiver, amendment request to the United States Department of Education around participation rates. Basically, the statute includes that if a school has a 50% opt-out rate, that they be excluded from school accountability. So we're waiting for the amendment that we submitted last January to get through the process, and then we'll begin the cycle of another amendment. I can't say that that type of amendment has no record of being approved in any state in the country, but we'll go through that process and see what happens. Okay, let's talk about APAC for a minute, because we have an APAC meeting upcoming. We have one 2-hour meeting that we've had scheduled earlier in October, which is when our regular meeting is scheduled, to address some topics that I'll talk about on the next slide. But we also have agreed in the past that as we talk about these, prepare for these APAC meetings, I bring the agenda information to this group and give this group an opportunity to inform the agenda that we build out. So before we do that, it's just good to remember APAC has a very specific purpose, and you see those on the screen. Purposes, you see those on the screen now. Let's go to the next slide. So the September, October, as we again are going to split those up. We're going to review and discuss the 3 through 10th grade ELA test blueprints. That will be a big portion of our time. With APAC and TAC, we're going to review the RISE benchmark study, assessment study. So our TAC group had recommended that we analyze the use of benchmark assessments. We've seen an increase in the use of those assessments over the last number of years. And so we've had an intern for the Center for Assessment to conduct an initial study on that, and we'll be reviewing that in TAC and then again in APAC. And then the audit. The board, when they received the audit and gave approval for it to be published during their most recent board meeting, they also passed a motion to direct the Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee to review the findings and the recommendations from the audit and forward ideas to address those. the full board. I'm going to pause here for a minute and give this group an opportunity to provide other ideas. If there are things that you think are important or pressing for APAC, remembering that they're charged. Maybe we go back to the previous slides so everybody can remember what the group, that committee is specifically charged to do. We'll pause for a few moments and give this committee an opportunity to give us ideas for future agenda items. Al?
We've discussed about participation rates around Aspire Plus and just engagement of students, especially in light of ACT being devalued. Is there a discussion about that timeline to maybe re-examine it, or to talk about going back to course-based testing philosophy or anything surrounding that?
That would be a good topic. The APAC could direct the board to, or could recommend the board, we don't direct the board, could make recommendations to the board to consider that issue. And APAC, again, can surface perspectives from the field about that. So, Hal, if I'm hearing you right, really just an agenda item where we talk about the effectiveness of Utah Aspire Plus assessment, whether it's realized promise that, or the hope that whatever the legislation behind it provided. I think, if I remember back, I think part of the reason for bringing Utah Aspire Plus in was belief that it would be a more meaningful assessment, connecting it to ACT, and the evidence, it'd be hard to find evidence to support that. In reality.
And just the related to the participation rate, and really kind of, I would love a deep dive into really surveying our practitioners or people in the field, and talk to the English language arts high school teachers, talk to the math teachers, talk to the science teachers, talk to those administrators about utilization or lack of utilization or priority around the Aspire, because I think there's powerful information that they probably need to weigh in on if it goes to those larger discussions, because it's just been a challenge. I don't know what else to say. It's been a really tricky challenge.
Okay. I know that's that fits perfectly with the charge of APAC, so that's a great agenda item to add.
Can I jump in on that discussion for just a second?
You bet.
I think Hal has a good point. I would also take the other side of that. I think that it's handled very differently if your school is a 7th through 9th grade school versus the 9th through 12th grade or the 10th through 12th grade high school. Because I do think that the 9th grade teachers are using it very differently if they are housed in the junior highs versus the 9th and 10th grade teachers housed in the high schools. I think the participation rates when the 9th graders are in the junior highs, there is a big discrepancy or a big, like they're seeing more participation rate versus what Hal's probably seeing, where the 9th grade, I believe, Hal, your 9th graders are in the high schools. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're 9-12.
Yeah. So I think they're seeing, because I know that our high schools over here on the west side are seeing lower participation rates because 10th grade is using Utah Aspire Plus, whereas our 9th grade, when it's used when it's housed in the junior highs, are seeing higher participation rates. And the tests are just seen differently because they are coupled with the RISE testing. So I think he's absolutely right. There's definitely discrepancies and the tests are being used differently. I know when I was so grateful that the reports were printed immediately this year and I could just hand them to my students, because in previous years when I have hand delivered those reports for the Utah Aspire Plus for my previous year's 9th graders, when I've taken them around to our area high schools and said, could you please give these to my former students, the different high schools would look at me like, what are these? You know, we've never seen these before. And I would say, well, my students are expecting these. They know what they are. They are excited to see what their ACT predictive scores are. Please make sure that they get into their hands. It just seemed like it was the first time that they had seen those reports. And so I definitely think that yeah, a discussion is warranted in how those tests are being utilized, and are they being utilized the same way, and where are the benefits happening? So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I also hear, in your comments, I also hear that as we look at participation rates, which we generally will look at by the grade level, but it might be helpful for us with 9th and 10th grade Utah Aspire Plus to break it out, if we can, by the setting and look at participation rates, not just by 9th grade, but by the setting that they're receiving their instruction in.
Yeah, if you compare it with this RISE, I could totally see how your participation rate would be a lot better.
Yeah, that's definitely what we're experiencing. So.
Okay. Any other ideas for future APAC agenda items? Okay, well, we're going to move on, but if you have any thoughts that come to you, never hesitate to send those to me by email. We do still have a vacancy. We talked about this last spring. Our current secondary principal, who's been appointed to APAC, has had to leave that assignment because he's had a change in position and is no longer a secondary principal. So we're still looking for somebody, a good candidate, somebody who has interest, not necessarily, they don't have to have special interest in assessment, but you might have secondary principals in your school that you think engage with you around assessment topics and data in ways that they could contribute to the APAC. I would just invite you or request of you to think of those individuals and give them a shoulder tap and encourage them to submit an application so we can fill that vacancy.
Could it be a vice principal? Does that fit under the umbrella, or does that have to be the principal?
I believe, let me verify that before you leave today. I'll answer that how I think a vice principal's application would be considered as well. I think in that, what I don't know is when they wrote the internal policy and they used the term principal, if the board is defining that as a leader at the secondary school.
Yeah.
But I'd be really grateful for any of you, if you have administrators, secondary administrators that you think would be good candidates, you just reach out to them and encourage them to apply and give them information about where to find the application. Okay. Data release schedule. I think we've talked in this group before. Last January and February, we did, a group of us at the state board got together a Six Sigma professional learning experience specifically targeting our ability to collect, process, report out on state assessment results. We laid out timelines then, and we've been working to try to improve the speed with which we return assessment results. Our superintendency, this is a high priority to them as well. It's amazing to me how difficult it's amazing to me how difficult it is to do this. These are the dates that we have for releasing assessment results as we move into the beginning of the school year. I want to tell this group publicly, this is phase one this year. If we meet this, we'll cut our reporting time by about 16%, I think we will save versus last year or from our long-term benchmark reporting timeline. This isn't satisfactory for us, though. We expect to do a debrief at the end of this year and then go back and really try to engage this even more. We have a goal that by August 1st, we'd be able to release. The long-term goal is by August 1st, we'll be able to release accountability results. There are states in this country who release assessment results in their state law. They have to release it in July or 1st of August, different dates that are on the calendar. One of the challenges we have here is there's a July 7th. This is this complicated nature. There's a July 7th deadline for schools to upload or complete their ETL submission, student enrollment submission. Until we get that completed, we can't connect that data back to our assessment results in a way that allows us to move forward with processing. I'm interested internally having discussions about moving the July 7th date for ETL deadlines up. That won't be popular with lots of people, but in terms of being able to get our assessment results, accountability determinations back quicker, that's something we'll have to talk about. These are dates. We'll keep you posted as we move through this calendar. If we run into unexpected delays, we'll obviously make sure you are first of the group to know about that. And I hope you'll communicate that with your communities. Right, next slide. So this very moment, we are here and up at the Capitol. There is a group that is meeting with some key legislators. Also, members of the public are up there, and our literacy team and superintendents here providing an update on the implementation of Senate Bill 127 that was passed 2 years ago. This is just a high-level overview of some of the results. I'm not going to spend time talking about these, but I wanted to just share the slides. So again, you're seeing these. You might be seeing these before that group. They started the same time as us. I don't know on their agenda where this falls in. But the overall reading on grade level, we'll just click through these slides. I'll give you a few seconds on each one to look at it. If there are questions or comments, you can put those in the chat. Or you can just come off mute. Give a little bit of commentary. This is one of the slides that maybe has the best news of all the ones that you're going to see here. This is your percent of kindergarten students achieving benchmark. You'll notice the beginning of your kindergarten students were as low as we've had in a number of years, and the end of year exceeds what we've had since the pandemic.
This is KEEP.
This is using the Acadians. Next slide. Next slide. This is just highlighting that we traditionally see a decline in the second grade from beginning of year to end of year, students achieving benchmark. 22-23, the state did not realize that decline that you'll see in all the previous years that are here and even beyond that. Next slide. Next slide. Now we're looking at progress, making typical or better progress. Don't know what we would say about this. Probably be questions. I don't have an explanation at this point.
Who's this going to, the audience?
This is being presented at the Capitol. There's going to be key members of the Education Interim Committee were invited, and then there's a broader group. Also, the Science of Reading panel, expert panel, is there as well. Next slide. Let's go to third grade.
Sorry. Don't look like it.
Okay. All right. And again, we provide these materials not to overwhelm you with all this content, all these slides, but to give you resources you can go back to and look through it other times as well. Okay, let's move on.
Hey, really quickly, we only have about 55 people in the Nearpod, and there are several slides coming up where we need some input from you specifically. So if you're not in the Nearpod, would you please click on the link so that we can get that important feedback. We've got feedback. I need some, and toward the end of the meeting, there will be some other information that some of the that Sydney needs for around Acadians. So, and just a quick heads up as we're doing general assessment, normally what we do is we, do PEEP and KEEP and Acadians before we do RISE. But because of the legislative meeting, Sydney and Teresa ask if we move their slides down. So you'll hear, we have one slide for Utah Aspire Plus, and we're hoping at that point, Teresa will have finished her presentation, or as soon as Elise starts talking, I'm supposed to text. So just so you are aware, normally, we try to cover all the elementary stuff, and then we do secondary. This time we're going to do a little bit of secondary for those of you who stay on the meeting and you're like, oh, we're done. Please stay, because there's a whole bunch of stuff after that. Okay, a couple little things. This is a slide we usually present every year at the beginning of the year, and particularly in new AD meetings. But we want to make sure that you're aware that it is your responsibility to keep us updated on any changes in personnel, staff for the listserv so that we make sure that we know who is supposed to be contacted about with AD memos and AD meetings. So if you're brand new and you're not sure, please email. You can email me and Amy, and we will happily make sure that whatever information we have is updated so that we can get you on that listserv. That we also gave you the link to our website where there's lots of information. The website are all getting updated this year, so you'll probably see a change sometime in hopefully January. There is an assessment director website specifically, if you click there, and then there's resources specifically for assessment directors. And another thing that we highly recommend you do is that you subscribe to our YouTube channel because we record all of our webinars and all of our meetings. And so if you ever need to go back or you have to miss one, you can go back and look at them. And we usually just send you the link and say, check here, and we can find them. Emily works really hard to try to timestamp our AD meetings in particular so that if you can find, if you're looking for something specifically, you can usually find it with the timestamp. There are also assessment director specific resources that we want you to be aware of that we do update every year. Our assessment director resource guide, this is where all the testing dates are. They're all listed specifically. There is a one-pager that unfortunately due to ADA requirements the one-pager isn't as wonderful as it used to be, but we're trying to work with that. But you can print that out. I always print it out and have it right there because some people ask me all the time and I don't remember all 11 assessment dates, so I go look at them all the time. Also, the assessment and accountability assessment task calendar. We started this 2 years ago. We went through it, the systems team went through and updated it, so there's some new things on it that we added that we thought maybe needed a little bit more clarity. You're going to notice this year, starting in the next AD memo, we're going to be providing these links in every single AD memo so that you can actually find them quickly, in addition to some of the Padlets that you're going to hear mentioned today that we have for special education. Jared has a Padlet that they use for Acadians. We're going to keep those in our AD meetings weekly so that you can access those quickly. But you have to click on the AD memo in order to find them fast, so it may save you time having to email us to ask for information. And the reason we can't post our Padlet links directly on our website is because of ADA 504 requirements, because it's impossible to get Padlets into ADA compliance. So we can provide you with the links, and then you need to go and find that information. The building connections, assessment connections in our LEA, we're really excited about this because the last time I checked, we had 30 LEAs and about 155. We had 155 people registered, and there's like 30 LEAs and like 28 or 29 charter schools, I think is kind of where we're at. We would really like to get everyone there. This is going to be not a repeat of an AD meeting. We are actually doing all kinds of scenarios that we're going to ask you to discuss with people in your LEA to help make decisions. For example, some of the interesting things we're finding with testing ethics, information, how information is being spread, who is getting the right information. So if you can attend this meeting in your buildings with yourself, your ALS directors, and ALS directors are the ones that work with our EL population in case somebody's not sure. We sometimes use alphabet soup and then we forget that new ADs may not know that. Our special ed directors, our curriculum directors, literacy directors, if you could please encourage them to come and join you in a room in your LEA, it will be very, very useful. San Juan School District has a mandatory conflict and can't attend, and they've asked that we record the meeting. We are going to record it, but you need to be aware it's going to be a different kind of recording than you can just go back and watch the meeting. Because if you are going to watch the recording, we would like you to get these young people in a room so that you can actually participate in the information. We're trying to provide better communication within LEAs, as well as trying to cut down on some of the millions of emails that people are trying to send to each other all the time, that there are just some decisions. You're going to have time to calendar things. There's going to be some important discussions. You will not be sent to your own individual breakout rooms, except for some of our singleton charter schools. We may put a bunch of you in a room together to talk together. But if you're a big LEA, you're just going to meet with your people. We're going to say, now you discuss. We'll set a timer and then we'll call you back and ask you to share. That's the format for this because I've been asked that a couple times, and that's why when we record it, it's going to be a different kind of recording than you're used to. So we wanted you to be aware of that. And then to try to show you how important it is that you know who some of these people are, I created a poll that I'm going to have you answer your poll. And basically what I'm asking you is if you know and communicate regularly with people like your UTREC specialist, your special ed director, your ALS director, your curriculum director, your literacy director, and your IT support people. Because if you don't know who they are, you need to find out. We'll be really blunt because all of these people are the people that are going to make your job easier, as well as make sure that you guys are communicating within each other. Tracy's going to address the issue that we have sometimes with special ed, that they don't get to communicate weekly like we do. That's one of the rules that they have, that they only communicate off and on. So we really depend on you to be forwarding information or sharing it. It's perfectly, we don't care who the listserv information goes to. You can add all those people to our listserv and we'll happily send it out. It's a button. So I'm going to go ahead and have you guys answer this poll. Did it work? Yeah, there it goes. Okay. Did it work? Oh. There we go. Sorry, I had to click teacher. It was my fault. So there's two parts to this survey. You have 1 minute to answer the question. And I'm glad to see we have 76 people in the Nearpod, which is a lot for our usual Nearpod. I don't know how many people are in the meeting because I can't see the Zoom, but thank you, those of you who joined. Okay, I'm going to share the results so you can see. It's pretty much what I thought. I made sure to put on there that I do know that there are a lot of charter school people out there who they have all the roles. So if you want to see, 60.3 said, yes, you communicate regularly with those people. We had 23% not answer and 12 people said they have most of the roles. And then we have about 5% of you who said no. So you have a task, please. Because we're really trying to encourage some more communication. Okay, here is the second question. Have you shared the invitation so that people are aware of it? And more important, have you arranged or reserved a place for you guys to meet? Because remember that you're not going to do this virtually. You need to be together in a room. And we're going to go ahead and start that as well. So, teacher. Oh, can't get it to answer, get the question to answer.
What if they shared it and arranged a room? There's not an option for that.
I know.
But
Share
they've
it.
done all the things they were supposed to.
Okay. Here's the answer to that question. Yeah, I just thought I'd remind everybody about the room because that's what we forget when we're virtual so much. So I thought I'd remind everybody about the room. But thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on. Quick reminder, testing plans are due, as always, on September 15th. The link has been updated. The list that's listed on here are all of the things that you need to provide. One, there is a new question on the testing plan this year that is asking you to identify another person in your LEA who is also responsible to respond to alert papers. If you remember, we talked about this last spring that people wanted to have more than one person. That person, it's identified in there, so please provide that and we'll make sure that we get that in our, that I have that, Emily and I have that, so we can send you the information about alert papers, which I will talk about in just a second. But we will call out that in the audit, people who are not turning their testing plans in on time were mentioned. There are about 7 LEAs who don't turn them in on time, and after the 15th, we start sending reminders. This is a legislative rule. This is not even board rule. This comes from comes from law. So by September 15th, you need to get this submitted. At the bottom, you notice in bold, it says, please print or save your survey results. Please do that and make sure that you share that with maybe the other person that you have in your office, because we get asked a lot to provide you again with what your plan was. But you want to make sure that you're keeping those somewhere. So if somebody came and asked you where they are, you would know exactly where that information is. Okay, testing ethics. Quick reminder that you are required to provide yearly training. And I had a really interesting question. Somebody said, well, I thought it lasted like 2 years. And you're like, no, it's every year. And it's school year. It's not, oh, we did it in the spring, so we don't have to do it again until next spring. Remember that any person who will be proctoring any statewide test, and that includes PEEP and KEEP and WIDA and Utah Aspire Plus and RISE, of course, any of those tests, everyone has to have ethics training. So this should be part of the beginning of the school year stuff you do. And you are required to have them sign that they acknowledge the form, and you have to keep the forms. You have to keep them more than a year. I'm not sure what the rules are. I was going to look that up and I couldn't find it in time to find it because I have to contact another person. But as LEAs, you're required to do that. And the audit found that a lot of people are not keeping those forms. Like they couldn't, when they came to talk to people, nobody had any idea who was signing them and who was keeping them and, all that kind of stuff. So I put the links at the bottom of this for the testing ethics policy, the training, which has been updated, of course, and the signature form, which is also updated. So you can share those out widely. So, yep.
Can they be digitally signed?
Can they be digitally signed? No, because you have to know that they actually watched their training. The problem with everybody lumping the testing ethics policy like in Canvas courses, remember you guys, it's really important that people understand that if you violate this, you can lose your teaching license. And we are seeing an increase in testing ethics violations. We talked about this last spring. And I'm wondering if some of it's because people are just going, well, we see this every year and moving on. It's really important that people understand the nature of this and digitally signed forms that they can just sign. Are you sure that, whoever is doing your training, because a lot of times it's just at a school, the principal does it in faculty meeting, they need to understand the importance of this. And that includes paraprofessionals, your special ed teachers, your TVIs, because sometimes those people get left out and people forget, wait, our students with low vision have special aides that work with them. Those people also need to go through testing ethics, especially because they have to do even more specialized work with the test and see more of the test than anybody else. So I hope that helps. Yeah, Christine.
So on a digital signature, when they're in a live training, they receive the training, you give them a digital form to fill out that they have to be credentialed to sign in, and you open it for 15 minutes, like you have 15 minutes to fill this out for people that are in the room with the training. Is that going to be sufficient because they have to have their credentials to sign in to do the form? And it's got a time limit on it, or it's just not out there where anyone can do it at any time.
Yeah, Kim, I think we're.
Would it be okay? I'm looking at ADs who are saying no, so
we're in a day and age now where digital signatures can be accepted in lots of legal settings. So it's just the key, I think, there would be making sure they understand the person providing the training, who provides the form, it is clear, the teacher's still accountable. When they sign that, they're signing they received all of those piece of information and they're aware of it. Then you have the ability to store that, to retrieve it if need be. Either for an individual teacher that might have had a violation, a complaint come that UPAC then wants to see the form, or in this case, an audit comes through and says, I want to see what you're doing with the forms.
I think in a similar way, so in our district, the expectation is the building principals are providing that training every year, but we have the actual signature form in our HR system where we have all of our required policy, procedural guarantees that they sign every year. So we would include it there. So yes, it's digital, but there is a requirement for the training to be done in the schools.
And it's a matter of checking with your legal consult in the district in terms of what's going to be supported if it goes to a legal matter. Because we're going more that way, but it all is getting confirmed with your lawyer, because if you have to go to court, you've got to be able to have evidence.
I had a teacher yesterday actually send me a form and complained that it was really hard to download and find. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I'm not sure, I just said, I'm sorry, and sent it to the AD so that they were aware, and just said, remember, school administrators are supposed to collect the forms or acknowledge that it was received. So that's a really important thing to remind, at the beginning of the year when everyone's doing, bloodborne pathogens and human trafficking and all the, 5 hours, 50 hours of training, lumping testing ethics in there may not be the wisest thing if you have any concerns about that. This would be my recommendation, because, that's why in the new testing ethics training, we have a lot of discuss this. Can you click on this? Are you looking at that? And eventually I'm hoping to turn it into even more interactive, but we can only do, so much at the beginning. And plus some of you have adapted that yourselves. So any other comments in the chat?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a few.
Okay.
A question from a couple of people, you have to keep them more than a year, or we keep them for a fiscal year and then discard, just let us know how long.
It's at least a year, and it's calendar year. It's like not just a fiscal year. I think it's longer than that. And I'm going to have Amy as our, you may want to check with your, the data retention, because it follows the data retention policy for some kind of signature form. But in the audit, it wasn't clear exactly what they were talking about. And so I was trying to find out how long some of those forms have to be kept. I know that when we go out and do observations, we can ask for those, and we need to be able to see them for the current year for sure. But I think you probably should be, remember, if there's a question that comes up at the end of the testing season that somebody comes and reports to you, say in December following spring testing, if you've thrown the forms away, you have no proof that the person signed a form. So you have to keep that kind of stuff in mind. So
Yeah, we'll do this.
And we will find
We'll
out
get-
in-
Yeah, we'll get an official answer on that and get it in an AD memo.
I looked, but I couldn't find it. So we have to go to the state. I can't think of the archive, whoever the archive people are, and that's part of it. Real quick thing about parental exclusion. Remember, Darren kind of addressed this a little bit. The parental exclusion form was approved. I put the links at the bottom of this page. They've been on the website since the day after the board approved them. We are working through, we have to get the translator approved and on all of that. So the Spanish forms will be posted.
How fast?
The Spanish,
I'm in a bind trying to send it out like in the
For
next few
Spanish?
days. Yeah.
I have the Spanish ones. I just have to make them accessible, and then I can get them posted. So hopefully by tomorrow.
Okay. I hate to have to use a previous form, and it just doesn't look like there's the same level of treatment.
I just have to make them pass accessibility. I just got them yesterday.
Well, I could develop my own. You can just pass it to me quietly.
Real quick thing, we talk about alert papers. Last year we got our first alert paper the third week of August. So I just want everyone to be aware of the fact that we do get them with benchmark modules. We get them with interim tests. We get them with summative tests. We get them on WIDA tests. We get them with Utah Aspire Plus. So what you just need to be aware of is when the algorithm from whichever vendor notifies us, we have a policy that happens. The algorithm looks for specific things: harm to self, harm to another, harm harm from another person, severe depression, trauma, specific and serious requests for help. I appreciate all of you guys because we got over 400 last year. By the end, we even got them after the testing thing had closed once the test went through. So we had over 400 last year. Remember that both Kim, I get them, Emily helps monitor these as well. She will send them with a secure link. We let you notify is the minute we get them, we send a high importance email to the AD, and also it will go to the other person that you are designated in your LEA that you want to have that. Make sure they're aware that they're going to be notified, by the way, so they don't go, what is this? And then we're expected that you guys review the email and respond back to us within 24 hours. And I need a confirmation email that says you've completed the appropriate thing, not just we've addressed it. You know, you don't have to tell me everything, but we do need to make sure that, you know, parents were notified, blah, blah, blah. So that's the main thing. Another thing that came from Lindsay Henderson, she asked me to just remind everybody about the acceleration in math guidance has been updated, and this can affect participation code usage, which we will give you the new updated codes for some of the things have been retired. We talked about this back last spring. We have the official list and we'll share it in the September meeting. But one of the things you need to be aware of that if you are accelerating math, that students may have to take more than one summative test within that same year. And the expectation generally is that they would take 7th grade math the first semester, 8th grade math the second semester, and then they would possibly take a full year of secondary math 1 or a whole year of 7th grade math, 8th grade first semester, and then secondary math the second semester. But the rule is that secondary math 1, whatever they're accelerating, secondary math 1 has to be completed by the end of 8th grade. So there are we've noticed this trend of people saying, well, we're going to finish it in 9th grade. And that doesn't follow the acceleration guidelines. And so everybody who's accelerating math has to be through secondary math 1 by the end of 8th grade. There is no, we're going to do the first semester and then we're going to finish the second semester, the first semester of 9th grade for obvious reasons. Because if you're not on a junior high model, the kids are going to another school. There's no way to track if they're actually completing their secondary math 1. And the accountability rules are being a little bit fudged with not taking tests for secondary math 1. So you want, so remember that's basically what the rule is. We'll provide a little bit more on participation codes next time because we want to make sure the chart is completely accurate. And we'll provide you with all the guidance with the codes that have been, rejected and removed. So
Joan is asking, so this means they do not get SGPs in 8th grade for those accelerating?
I have no idea. If they're accelerating, I don't know what you mean by they don't get SGPs.
She says, so this means they do not get SGPs in 8th grade for those accelerating, right? And do they get counted for both proficiencies in 7th and 8th?
How are accelerated courses included in the accountability measures?
And Michelle left the room, so she gets to answer that question.
Accelerated courses are counted as a standard course would. So every student is assigned an ELA, a science, and a math score. And potentially, unless there's a reason we wouldn't expect them to participate. If they're a 7th grader taking math 8, that's the score that we use in accountability. If they are taking secondary math 1, that is also, the score that we use. If they happen to take 2 assessments in the same year, say 8th grade math and secondary math 1, because they are on an accelerated 8th grade math track, we take the secondary math 1 score, just to be clear about which score is used. We don't look at, I think there was some confusion that we take the higher of the 2 scores. We take the higher of the 2 grades, the more difficult assessment.
And there wouldn't be an SGP for secondary math 2 or 3 in 8th grade because we don't have a test for that. So if that's what you meant, Joan, if a student's taking secondary math 2 and is an 8th grader, there is no test that they take. So
I think it's a
Must be
little more
nice.
nuanced than that. So let's see. So in their 7th grade year, they have a 7th grade summative and an 8th grade summative based on what you were saying, because they should take a mid-year summative for 7th and and a summative at the end of the year for 8th grade. Therefore, they're going to have 2 proficiency scores for math for that single student. The only way an SGP could be calculated is if they're in the right course taking pattern. And so it seems that the only SGP they're going to get is for the 7th grade
It
test?
depends on, that's a really great question, Joan. In order for an SGP to be calculated, there have to be about 3,000 students in the group
Mhm.
that take a course, the same sequence of courses. So there are enough students that took, say, at end of year, Math 6, Math 7, Secondary Math 1, which I think there are. When we made the decision to incorporate Secondary Math 1 back into RISE, we found that there were more than 3,000 eighth graders who were taking Secondary Math 1 that were on an eighth grade math track. That would be sufficient for them to receive an eighth grade SGP based on that sequence of courses. I don't know if, say, that might be a case where we do bring in the eighth grade math if they take Secondary Math 1, but an SGP, there's not enough students. We might rely on the Math 8 score for SGPs. I don't know how the SGP code handles multiple students or multiple test scores in the same subject for a single student. It may utilize that Math 8 score. I'm not sure. I can talk with Erin and see, but I do know that we have a sufficient cohort of students who take that sequence of courses, and that's part of why we chose to bring Secondary Math 1 back into the RISE pool.
And maybe I can give you some specific examples and probably take this outside of this conversation because
Sure.
I'm concerned, to Brooke's point here too, that we have some of our schools that are potentially being put at a disadvantage if they are accelerating students because of how this is calculated. And so I can show in past years where with some student numbers, and that might be the best way to do this, where we've got students who are not generating SGPs because of this very reason.
Okay.
And yeah, it might be better just taken off.
Yeah, let's have a conversation, certainly, and I'm happy to talk with Brooke as well, that if students are taking a very unique sequence of courses, then an SGP might get missed. And these are high-performing students, and their growth scores do matter in your accountability system. So I hear that, and yeah, I would love to open up that conversation.
Ready?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess just a reminder, and as we've been discussing, we have submitted amendments. I'm struggling because I'm like, we asked you for public comment last October, and we've been talking about this for quite some time. The weighting and indicators included in the accountability system have not changed. Just there are some changes to the calculation of English learner progress and to growth that I will be talking about in more detail somewhat today, but I think next month will be a very good time because you will be able to, in our next AD meeting, we will be in the secure release of the school report card. You will be able to look at your own data, and we can have a more concrete discussion about what the changes are and a new technical manual available. So you can go ahead. Every year, this ESSA requires the indicators that we publish. Are you sure these aren't the new AD meetings?
Yeah, remember I told you that we put them in here because everyone needed to hear them.
Oh, okay. I'm like, this seems like the other presentation, but
Yeah,
maybe it is.
Yeah.
It was interesting when we were doing the accountability redesign work a few years ago that I showed the law to an assessment director, and they said, wow, I never made the connection that these come directly from and they do. What the law requires achievement, what they call an academic indicator for non-high schools, which is generally interpreted for growth, and we also include that for high schools. But anyway, post-secondary readiness is what is known as a school quality and student success indicator. So that is how ACT, et cetera, are separate from achievement and growth. Go ahead. In the amendments that we have submitted and that we expect to hear soon on acceptance, we have amended EL progress, the EL progress indicator, both the exit criteria, which we've talked about a lot and we'll talk more about today, changing from a 5.0 for students to enter monitoring status to the 4.2 with a 3.5 minimum in speaking. We are removing the AGP portion of the growth index and relying only on SGP for that growth, but it will still be calculated as a point index, which is required in our state law. Overall accountability ratings, that is the school letter grade, has been removed thanks to some legislation from the last legislative session. And we will be revising state long-term goals, which has very little impact on you as LEAs, but we are required at the state level to define state long-term goals and publish those, which the previous addendum and waiver allowed us to extend those long-term goals by 2 years. We will see continued work on defining new long-term goals in the coming year. But those are the changes that we submitted as part of Title 1A in our amendment. So again, I just want to message clearly that there will not be a school letter grade. We didn't have one for a long time. Each year was kind of a different reason to not publish a letter grade. This last year we did. It was, well, I guess, neutrally received, not a lot of attention to it in the media, et cetera. But now that requirement has been removed from state law. ESSA has never required an overall rating. That is a state directive, and we no longer have that requirement in state law, so we are removing that from the school report card, which I think is a win for all of us, that that removing that frustration of boiling down performance of a school to a single rating, and instead we just publish the data. So annually, the school report cards are released. As you know, there is a period of time where you and anybody in your district, the secure login will go to assessment directors and to charter directors. You can share that with anyone within your LEA. That secure release period is intended to be a time for you to discuss within your district, to prepare communication, to share with your local boards before it becomes public, so that there are no surprises to you when that comes out. We will expect that secure release to be open from September 8th to September 22nd. So 2 full weeks, I think even a few extra days for you to preview your school report card. And there's always that link to the report card on the data gateway or a specific site. I do want to add a plug here that ESSA requires that LEAs publish their LEA report card on their website, and that the URLs are year specific. So if you have put that URL on your website for, say, 2019 or 2021, it will need to be updated to the more current the most current year. That can be done when the site is live on September 27th, I think was on the slide that Darren shared, that it will be public and live on the 27th. I already talked about this, what to do, verify your data accuracy. We are including you as part of our testing and data quality assurance process. This is not, the school report card secure release is not just for you to receive information, it is also for us to receive information back from you. I want to make that clear, that if you see something that is, wow, our graduation rate doesn't seem quite right, or, those are the kinds of things that we're open to receiving feedback on, so that corrections can be made also before the data is public. The Accountability Technical Manual, which has been mentioned a few times already in this meeting, is the primary source of information for where to see how each indicator is calculated. It also will include the new information about identification of CSI, TSI schools, the new exit criteria. That's as part of our the board rules that were amended. That one is 420, and the other one is 497, I think. Anyway, that will be included in the manual, and I think it would be helpful that when we talk about this more in depth next month, that you have access not only to your school report card, but to the new version of the Utah Accountability Technical Manual, so that I can show you exactly where to find the information in the document.
The Appendix A will be updated with all the new participation.
That's right. There are a few changes we are making to Appendix A, which is participation codes, and we will cover that as well. Here is my contact information. Again, I'm always happy to talk with you about specific questions.
Now you get to talk about the SM.
Yeah. So another ESSA amendment, and one that we're really happy about is.
Just like I'll click past you talked about this. Part,
Okay.
So, thank you. Oh no, that was everything you knew.
There we go. It's not the EL side. Okay.
Take long to
It's
go.
both presentations.
And then the new secure. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Maureen, you're up.
I guess that makes it my turn.
Makes it your turn.
Quick update. We've been having some issues getting off the ground this year with Amplify and ADM. Amplify, we have data flowing. I checked it. It looks good. So if you've been having issues with Amplify, they should be corrected. If you notice any incorrect information in Amplify, get in touch with me and I will get it sorted out. ADM we are still working on, but it looks like Monday we should have that issue resolved. We're crossing our fingers for Monday. Could be another day or so after that, but Monday seems like a good day for ADM to be back up in business. It feels like a good day. Monday, sure.
And I just want to say, we understand this is really disruptive to schools. So when I talked about that timeline for work and how complicated things could be, resolving this issue is identified to our team that's working on it as their highest priority. So there's other work that they've set aside to be able to address the roster rate issues. So it's important to understand that. I know it doesn't feel any better, but I do want you to know that's a high priority here across the agency and getting those roster rate issues resolved.
We are, and with Amplify, it turned out we fixed one problem, which led us to discover another problem. So there were a couple of layers there. If you are still having issues with Amplify, please get in touch with me and I will help you sort them out. Other than that, I think everything else is going all right. Let me know if that's not the case. And now I'm going to be talking about 3 things: student data privacy, our UTREX data exchange, and assessment eligibility and rostering. So to start with data privacy, we, in all of our jobs, we deal with a lot of student information. We know everything there is to know about students. And sometimes if there's a problem, you know, the best way to solve a problem is to just give every bit of information you have. Everything you have to get that problem solved. But in our case, we don't need to know every little bit of information about a student you're having an issue with. If you just want to give us an SSID, that's all we really need to solve the problem. You can give us your district student number for a student. That works too. But there are things you do not need to communicate with us in email form. So we don't need student names. We don't need any sort of pronoun where you could identify a student gender. We don't need any accommodations information. Just send us that SSID and we will be able to fix your student problem.
Especially if you identify which test you're talking about.
Yes, the test is great. Tell us
Sometimes
what
you guys send us the SSID number and say, can you please check and see why this isn't loading? And we have to say, which test are you talking about? So remember that SSID, but also make sure we know whether it's RISE or UA Plus or Acadians or whichever one it is.
But I'd rather ask a follow-up question than have you just blurt out a bunch of student information. That also goes for assessment vendor help desk. They also can just look up a student by SSID, so you don't need to share any extra information with them. Just the least amount of information is best for us.
And also pay attention to your email chains that are going around your district that then you guys send to us, that then it even gets even longer with even more information. So this is a really good communication, particularly for people who are new, to remind everybody about, remember when you're emailing, even within a district, that if it's going to go anywhere else, you know, you've got PII problems. So
You can always start a new email chain.
yes.
All right, so UTREX data flow. Your student information gets entered into your SIS system. Your SIS system presents that information to UTREX, goes through validations. Once you have nice, clean student data, you'll see it in the data gateway. And then once it's in the data gateway, it gets sent along to assessment vendors. Sometimes this process can take a day or two, depending on the timing of your UTREX submission, when the vendors come and pull information. So don't expect to see, if you make a change in your SIS, I wouldn't expect to see that change make it all the way to an assessment vendor for a day or two. If you need to look at your UTREX submission, you can go to the UTREX overview page in the data gateway. Not everyone has access to this. If you don't have access to the data gateway, make friends with your UTREX person, make friends with the person who's in charge of your SIS. They have access to this, and I'm sure they will be happy to share with you. If you need to check for those fatal errors for students, it's just right there in this UTREX submission box. You just click on the number of errors. It will download a spreadsheet for you, and you can see who has an error. To the right of your UTREX submission, no, that's right.
Okay.
Just to the right is where you can see if you have a stale Utah Compose extract. If you're looking up students in Utah Compose and you see old last year information, not updated information, you would come here to your UTREX overview page, and you might see a red button that says your Utah Compose extract is stale. All you have to do is hit the little reset button next to it. It will refresh your Utah Compose extract, and you should see nice up-to-date information there.
And one thing about Utah Compose is remember that it doesn't, your last year's data, this only starts once the UTREX information is new and flowing. So if you have still data, don't click it until your first day of school, because it's not going to it's just gonna update last year's, or you'll get an error. So remember that you have to do this every single year at the beginning, and I'll be, both Maureen and I will be putting a little reminder in the AD memos. Don't forget to check that, because a lot of times we start getting email from teachers saying, I can't see any of my current year, and then we go there and it's just stale and you need to click and update it.
And all it just does, it takes the click of a button.
And
you're
you
done.
literally push through the button.
Alrighty, so just a quick overview of what to look for with your LEA data. If the student has a fatal UTREX error, they are not going to be rostered for an assessment. Their information isn't going to go through. They aren't going to make it on an assessment. So that's the first place I look when someone contacts me about a student not rostering. Do they have a fatal error? Because that is going to stop it. You need to have accurate teacher cactus ID on courses for course-based assessments. If you look in, say, Amplify, and your courses are assigned to strange teachers or everything's mixed up, generally that's because the wrong cactus ID is associated with the courses you're sending. And you can look at your UTREX submission to check that. Scram records, the 1% status of a student can affect what tests they roster for. If a student is marked 1%, they're going to be rostered for DLM and not RISE or Utah Aspire Plus, so that's a good thing to check. Core codes, you need to assign the correct core codes to your courses for a course-based assessment. If they do not have a core code assigned that's going to trigger rostering, then students aren't going to be rostered. Your course exit and entry dates also affect course-based assessments. A student isn't going to be rostered until they begin a course. So if their entry date is incorrect, they aren't going to roster. Those course entry dates need to be within their school exit or entry and exit dates. If they are rostered in a course the day before they are supposed to enter school, that's going to cause an issue. For grade-based assessments, just the school entry and exit dates, if they haven't reached their school entry date, they aren't going to be rostered for a grade-based assessment. The assessment accountability resources page is going to have the list for all the core codes arranged by test, and it'll have the student assessment rostering manual, which has all the business rules that will that explain how students are eligible for tests, and it has the tiebreakers in case students are enrolled in more than one school. That is where you're going to find those resources. I was made aware yesterday that the Apple core codes are not on that page right now. They were the only ones that needed an update, so I would assume it's because they're being updated. No courses were taken off that list. There were just a few secondary courses that were added. So if you need to know those courses right now, you can email me and I can get them to you. All right, data exchange. How does your information get from UTREX to the assessment vendors? We have nightly uploads that go to Apple for Acadience, ADM, and Amplify, DLM, RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, Utah Compose, UTIPS. Every night they get fresh information from us that you give to us. It's updated nightly. We use pre-ID files for ACT and WIDA. We just send one big file with student information to them. New this year for WIDA, we're going to have 2 pre-ID files, which should help with data validation, maybe ease your workload a little bit when you have to go check your student data at the end of the year. Next. Private and homeschool students. LEAs, you're required to provide opportunities for private and homeschool students to participate in our state assessments. Those students need to be added to your SIS. They need to have, the minimum requirements for a student to be added to your SIS. They also need to have a school number. We have preset numbers for, yes, sorry, question.
Question online, DLM exchanges nightly?
It is, it's probably one of our most difficult data exchanges that we go through. It can be problematic. In general, it's nightly, but
Yeah, so
asterisk.
we started doing API One roster last year. If you remember, we had students that were loading on a nightly basis. We were still struggling to remove students off of that 1% flag. So I don't know if any of you remember those conversations last year, and we were asking you to manually remove those. So hopefully we have got that fixed. We are literally in the process of testing right now. So hopefully today they'll push their first load in test. We noticed that a lot of Scram entry dates, right? In order for a student to go into DLM, you have to have an active Scram record, right? That's our indicator that the student is special ed. We had a lot of Scram entry dates that weren't set to hit until 8/16, so that would have been yesterday, I think. So anyway, so hopefully we can get that going. We're gonna do some testing, and fingers crossed that by next week, we will actually start loading students into DLM itself. So stay tuned. We will keep you posted as that goes.
Yes, it is the most complicated rostering that we do. PEEP assessment, I see there's a question about that. If your kindergarten information is going into Data Gateway, nice and clean, they should go straight into KEEP and PEEP. If you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and email me. I'll check it out, make sure your UTREC submission looks good, and we'll escalate it further if it needs to be, if you aren't seeing students in for PEEP and KEEP.
Do you want to talk about the manual for the slide that you attached?
Yes, absolutely. So I think you need to have a school number for private or homeschool students. There are preset school numbers you use, 900 for homeschool, 995 for private. They are it's a standard across the state. They don't count against your accountability when you have students in the 900 or 995. There is a rostering manual that went out in the email with the slides for this meeting. So you can check that out, or please feel free to, if you have any questions about it, get in contact with me and I will help you out.
Question?
Yes.
Instead of putting your school number, wouldn't you put 990 as the entity ID, especially if they are not enrolled in any courses, 100% full-time homeschool?
Yes, you would put them in school number 990 in your SIS.
990?
990 for homeschool and 995 for private.
I thought you said 900.
Guys, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, 990 is, I apologize.
Okay.
It's 990 for homeschool and 995 for private.
Okay.
And it's all in the manual.
Manual.
Yes, please.
The manual is getting updated on the website. Our web guy is working very, very hard, and he's just very behind due to large projects, but it is going to be posted.
Excellent.
Someday. He's working really hard, I promise.
He bumped a lot of people to get the parental exclusion form on the second day. I mean, the day after the board meeting, just so you know. Shout out to our web
Yeah,
guys.
some of my web tickets have taken 2 to 3 weeks to get actually posted, and that's just because of his workload. We really only have one web developer, so he's working really hard. But I promise it'll get updated on the website.
All right, so next to assessment eligibility. How do students get rostered for assessments? We have grade-based assessments. So if your student is in 9th and 10th grade, they take Utah Aspire Plus. There are course-based assessments, RISE, Acadians. It's all dependent on what courses the student is enrolled in. 1% status, if a student is 1%, they are rostered for DLM. EL status, if they don't meet certain requirements and or they do meet certain requirements, they will be rostered for WIDA testing. For course-based assessment, you can look at those core code lists. They list each course that will trigger a student to be rostered for a test. This is a RISE one. The top, they are listed top down. So if a student has 2 courses they are rostered for, say 2 science courses, that top course is going to be the one that wins the tiebreaker, and they are going to be rostered for the top course on that list. So for instance, if I have a student that's enrolled in science grade 6 and just a regular homeroom grade 6, they are going to roster with their science grade 6 teacher in RISE over just their homeroom teacher because they have a higher priority on that list. All right, so if you have a student that's not rostering for a course, we sort of covered this a little earlier, you want to check that the student is actively enrolled in a course that will trigger an assessment if it's a course-based assessment. You want to check those course and school entry and exit dates. You'll want to look at those core code lists, make sure they're enrolled in the correct course with the correct teacher. You want to check your UTREC submission. If your UTREC submission fails, then updated student information isn't going to get through. You want to check for fatal errors. You want to check if perhaps the 1% flag has been inadvertently marked for a student, or if they're supposed to have a 1% flag if it's not set for a student. You want to check those teacher cactus IDs to make sure they are associated with the correct courses. And you can get in touch with me and I will check all those things for you if you like. Just if you're having any rostering issues, get in touch with me and I am happy to help you resolve them. And just one more mention, core code lists and student rostering manuals, they're all on that same page. They are great resources. Please look at them. And that's it for me.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessica Wilhelm, and I'm one of the special education assessment specialists, along with Tracy Gooley. We are going to change up our roles this coming year. I will be looking over our assessments with RISE and continue to oversee Utah Aspire Plus, ACT, our AP exams, CTE, and then I'll be looking over Apple. And Tracy is going to do some more work with DLM, Acadience, PEEP, and WIDA. So that's kind of how you would know who to contact about accessibility and accommodation questions. That's how our roles are divided in the assessment department. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about accommodations related to our state assessments. So our accommodations for our students really change how our students are learning, and for assessment purposes, we know that accommodations provide equitable access to grade level instruction and our state assessments. When students utilize accommodations that are determined to be appropriate for each assessment, and they do vary from assessment to assessment, we are ensuring that those accommodations do not alter the validity or the score interpretation for those specific assessments. The best way for teachers to become aware is to really be familiar with our test administration manuals and our accommodations policy, which is linked on the next slide. But teachers really have to familiarize themselves with what accommodations are allowable on each state assessment. When we are looking at participation codes, accommodated must be set for those students utilizing an assessment accommodation. Not all accommodations that are noted as an accommodation on student plans are necessarily a state assessment accommodation, but if it is an accommodation on a state assessment, that has to be noted. And also it's important to remember that while some accommodations are appropriate to use in the classroom and on a daily basis, they're not always appropriate to use on a standardized assessment, and that's why we try to have a clear outline as what's available to all students and what is an accommodation for students. Okay, so if I were you, I would bookmark all of these places. So you have a quick reference to all of our state assessment, accessibility, and accommodations information. On our special education website page is the link to our Utah's accommodation policy, and that will be linked to the 23-24 pretty soon. It's going through accessibility. So sometimes when we put that through, we don't exactly know the date, but it is available. We're just waiting for that to be linked on our website. The old one is posted. And when you link the special education page, go ahead and bookmark that Utah's participation and accommodations policy. That is going to be a robust resource for all accommodation policy questions with state assessment, as well as linking what test administration manuals are relevant to each state assessment. Within our,
Jessica, can I ask you a question really quick? So that would include anything with benchmarks, right? You put the accommodations in before benchmarks for like RISE, whatnot. And then with UTIPS, since high school benchmarks have now onto UTIPS, is there any kind of accommodations you can put in UTIPS?
So whatever is available as far as like resources within, where's Elise?
Right here.
Right there, she's next to you. I'm like, where is she? So, is there a UTIPS manual?
There's not a manual, there is a wiki help site that has some guidance. I would say that we will need to add some more stuff.
Okay, so let's do this, and a great question, because that was something that kind of evaded our minds. So we will work on putting together some sort of document to support what's available with UTIPS. But it's whatever's within that system now. So what goes on with the high school benchmarks will probably look different than what happens with ACT. Does that make sense?
Aspire, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Aspire, yeah. And so if you have questions or you need something, reach out to Jessica and UTIPS is, we will navigate how to work through those things, but we'll put that on our to-do list to get that out sooner before later. I didn't even think about that.
Thank you.
Hey, you bet.
thank you. Okay, in the participation manual, there are tables that outline for every assessment different resources that are available to all students. And if it's a resource for a state assessment, that's not considered an accommodation within the assessment. And then there are tables with our accommodations. So, and these are not going to mirror what happens in the classroom, because this is what is appropriate for each assessment, and it's going to vary for assessment to assessment. So whatever teachers are working on whatever assessment, they just need to become familiar with what these look like. Hey, no big updates around accommodations or accessibility this year, except, which actually I think this is a huge update, Acadience Math is going to have read aloud as an allowable accommodation. I know that's been a thorn in people's side for many years, and that's a change. So I think all teachers will celebrate that, and maybe you as well, when you're trying to answer why they're not allowed to do that. And then for ACT, there has been some updates to Braille code and screen reader capabilities. ACT really aligns with BANA, our Braille Authority of North America. So ACT has just ensured that language within the Braille code for ACT is matching BANA.
So as far as policy, like not a lot has changed as far as policy, right? Does that make sense? All of the accommodations have stayed pretty status quo across assessments. That big one is Acadience, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. There's some caveats there. There are some additional resources. So I don't know, many of you know that special ed department pushed across the state this summer an inclusion conference. And so we took some of those. I don't know if you'd ever really looked at the appendices in the current policy. There was some like really good resources that teachers could use to kind of help
track accommodations, things like that. So we created kind of like a meaningful inclusion document to like how to meaningfully include students and parents and gen ed teachers in those accommodation conversations. So we've inputted those tools that we kind of created and took some of what was existing in the policy and reworked. So you'll see some new updated stuff. There's a new accommodations tracker, which is really awesome in the back. So have your teachers promote that to your teachers and have them look at those appendices. There's some good resources that we kind of updated, which are really awesome. But otherwise, as far as policy, not much has changed within that. Okay, so let's talk about the Acadians. So when we talk about read aloud is now allowable, what this means is if an IEP 504 EL team, right, if it has been outlined that a student requires read aloud for the concepts and applications, your teacher can read that to the student, right? Your timing has to stay the same. Where Acadians is throwing caution is they are in essence considering this not as standardized assessment as like what you do when you're not providing this. So this is something that they have never allowed. They don't have any data to really show if opening this up and allowing read aloud on that, what that does to changing their cut scores, if that makes sense. So they just throw caution to teams that if students are using this, you can enter the data into the system. It will produce all of that for you. But knowing that their cut scores and risk scores, right? It's a screener to help identify those students who may be at risk, right? Don't include this as an accommodation, right? When they set those cut scores. Does that make sense? So if you have students that have had the read aloud and they're using that solely, right, as a risk indicator, they should probably not, right? There should be other components and data sets in place, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a screener. So that's kind of their caveat. So they understand that this was a piece of contention with teachers and it really needed to be there. So just make sure you get that message clearly out to the field. We will be communicating this again. I don't get in front of your special education directors until September. Okay, so at that point, it's a little bit later. If they're at the building connections, maybe we can put this on the docket to talk about at building connections, Kim, and don't let me forget. So if we've got SPED directors at the table. So anyway, so have anybody reach out to me if they have questions around it so students can have this. It is not built out into the system yet. I don't know when, hopefully sooner before later. What Acadians is asking is that there will be an indicator where you click accommodated, right, and we'll set some sort of read aloud so that they can disaggregate that data, and they really do want to kind of look at that research and see, you know, what does this do to changing scores for students. Does that make sense? Okay. There is a new document. So what I have done is I created this Acadians Reading and Math Accommodations Alternative and Alternate Assessment Option. So it was kind of all separated stuff previously. There is now one cohesive document that outlines what are the accommodations for Acadians Math, Acadians Reading, certain things that are not allowed. It's got your information on your TOSREC in there. How do we handle Acadians Math with nonverbal students? So I just squished all of that Acadians guidance and put it into one document. So that is now available. Again, getting stuff onto the website, it takes a little bit longer, but we will have that posted as soon as possible. So any questions around Acadians? Okay, perfect. This is just kind of a reminder and a kind of walk us into another really big change that's happening this year. So most of everything that we do within accommodations falls underneath IDEA 300.160. There is specific guidance, right, within that special education regulations around participation and assessment. So if we look at number 2, right, it states that the state, or in case of a district or school-wide assessment, guidelines must identify only those accommodations for each assessment that do not invalidate the score and instruct IEP teams to select for each assessment only those accommodations that do not invalidate the score. So why is this important? If you remember, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Yes. So if you remember previously, we did have IEP teams had the autonomy to determine a student could participate modified. That is no longer an option. So that is being removed this year. We have updated IEP forms to reflect this information. Again, special ed directors will hear this in September, so you're getting it first. So the reason being is IDA really doesn't give us the charge to allow IEP teams to choose accommodations that invalidate the score. So they will see that removed. You will still see the modified participation code sitting with Rise and UA Plus, because at the end of the day, we still have teachers that will provide non-allowable accommodations to students, right? And we still need to indicate that they're modified. One of the other things that will be happening is we will be invalidating those scores on the back end. So any modified tests, students will just be seen as non-participants and non-proficient. Does that make sense? So that's a big piece there. So if you have teachers coming to you or in the field, right, that we need the modified, we definitely need to figure out what's going on, and it's going to take a little bit to get that message through the field, but that's where we stand this year within modifications.
Tracy?
Yeah.
There was a question. And I believe this is regarding the document that you were talking about, that Acadians accommodation.
Yes, stay tuned, Carolyn. Okay, last year, we asked you guys if you wanted an accommodations Padlet, and you said yes. Yay! Asking you shall receive.
Here it is.
So what I want you guys to do is we kind of have a little quick scavenger hunt. If you can access that, and in fact, let me throw the Padlet link in the chat as well, but you should be able to hit that QR scanner code and get in and just kind of explore that for a minute. One, I want feedback. Is there something missing? But take a look and see what we have created for you guys and where you can find all those fabulous things. And PS, the new updated, you're gonna be shocked, Hal, you ready? The accommodations policy for this year is done, past accessibility, and ready to go.
Thank you.
It helps when you have a team member to tag things with you.
So we're hoping that you are all disseminating this to your special education administrators and that they are then disseminating this to your teachers. We're hoping this can be a really quick at your fingertips for all information that they need, as well as our contact information. We don't care who emails us in the field. It can be a teacher, an administrator.
So did everybody access that? And Michelle put the link in. Hopefully that works.
The only thing that's not here are our CTE exams. The Youth Science website that has been our current state vendor is going through an update, and that is not live. But as soon as I get that update from Greg Richens, who oversees the CTE exams at USBE, I will put that into the Padlet.
And the cool part about Padlets is, like, as we make changes, I mean, it automatically updates, right? I mean, I was on with an LEA looking at a DLM Padlet not too long ago and literally was adding documents as he was looking at it and saw the changes. So it's good to reference back to. Please share this out to teachers, special ed directors, anybody, everybody. The idea was kind of to have a landing zone, you know, one-stop shop to link you to all the things. And so if there's something that we're missing that you're thinking, oh, hey, this would be great to add, please, by all means, email Jessica and I. And our goal is to make this, you know, what it is that you guys need. I'm having a hard time accessing the Padlet. How about anybody in the room? Were you guys able to get in?
Yeah.
Try again.
Try again.
I was gonna say, it could be an IT issue if it's a charter school.
On their end?
Yeah.
I have it too.
Can you get in then or no?
No.
So is that something your
Yeah.
IT people will be able to help you with? Okay.
It's asking me to put in a
Carolyn says it's coming in restricted.
Okay, hold on, I'm going to Padlet, let's see.
That's me to install an extension to see it.
I think that's a USB security issue right
You guys
now.
have never had any problems with my deal on Padlets, right?
I went to try it too, and it says that I'm blocked by my administration.
Oh.
We'll figure it out.
We might have to talk to our own IT department.
Nice.
All right, well, and here's like the direct link to the Padlet. I don't know if that helps. I installed it and now it's sending me to add sites.
That works.
I got to it.
The direct link you just posted let me in without a problem.
Yeah.
The direct
Yes.
link did? Oh, so maybe it was the tiny URL.
The tiny URL.
Maybe I messed up the tiny URL. Sorry.
No, our office VPN is.
Doesn't like tiny URLs. So see if that one in there. Oh, yep, that worked. Okay.
So Tracy, there was another question.
Uh-huh.
Are schools penalized for modifying student?
Yep, they are excluded from accountability. They are seen as a non-participant. Yep.
You really need to defer back to that IDEA regulation if you're having pushback on that. That's not a Tracy thing, it's not a Jessica thing, it's not a USBE thing. That's a direct regulation from IDEA.
You know, and well, I mean, this is more sped people, but you know, email me or call me or Jessica if you really want to talk about, you know, if you're having pushback or teachers come to you that they're getting pushback from parents or something, there's things that we can help teachers and you know, with navigating how to have those conversations, but right, and statewide assessments, right, it's one data point that makes up what we have going with our students. So, and it is important to have that comparative data, right, in that standardized way, how are our students performing in comparison to their like peers. So, okay, cool. Who's the USBE contact for RISE accommodation questions? It's kind of a trick question. Throw it in the chat or shout it out if you're in the room. Who do you contact this year for RISE? Carrie, Tracy, question mark. Anybody else? Who do you contact this year for RISE questions?
Jessica.
Jessica. You can contact me. I'll include Jessica. We'll be tag teaming some stuff, right? So
nice.
I'm not going anywhere, so we still have the support. Good. Who do you contact for alternate assessment questions for students with significant cognitive disabilities? Tracy. And it's CY, by the way, no E. Love y'all out there. Where do you find the Utah participation and accommodations policy?
On the Padlet.
Padlet? Or where else is it housed? Anybody?
Special ed site, yes.
Special education
Services.
assessment webpage. Cool. And that should be linked in the Padlet for you too. Name one accommodation that requires a request form to USBE for RISE or Utah Aspire Plus.
Right.
Okay, cool. What about Braille? Contact us if you have Braille. Okay, cool. This is just your quick checklist. What are the things that you need to do by the end of August when we think about accommodations? Find out who's responsible for overseeing, right, those students in your building. 504 accommodations, right? Like who helps support that? It's good for this kind of a good checklist for your building people too. And English language learners, go meet them, please, especially new assessment directors. Go find out who your special ed director is, who oversees 504, all of those things. Please come to the Building Connections webinar, and that way we can discuss communication plans, all those fantastic things, and just kind of become familiar with some of the resources available, and then we'll start throwing more stuff out at you starting next month. Okay, alternate assessments. Alternate assessments are for students with significant cognitive disabilities. There are very specific criteria that make up these students, and it's determined by an IEP team. So I do get emails all the time. Hey, we've got some students that would benefit from alternate assessments. Wrong. Nope. That's not how we determine that. So, right, an IEP team has certain criteria to determine that the student has a significant cognitive disability. Because of that disability, they cannot access and show progress and measurable gains in our general education curriculum. Therefore, they need instructional support through our alternate achievement standards, the essential elements. Therefore, they qualify to participate in alternate assessments. So it's a very specific group of students. It should be less than 1% of our student population across the state, which it is. So we typically have about 0.97%, so under 1% of our students participate. If you're wondering, all the fantastic alternate assessments that we may possibly have. So IDEA also states that whenever a state or a district or a school has a required assessment for students, they are required to have an alternate assessment, right, as an avenue for those students to participate because, right, we have alternate achievement standards and we do have alternate assessments as a state. We are required to have one for all of our required assessments. So you will notice in this really teeny tiny chart, we have an alternate assessment to PEEP, to KEEP, to both Acadience Reading and Math, DLM. So you guys have heard DLM, Dynamic Learning Maps, is our alternate assessment to RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, and ACT. That's our big accountability assessment. We also have an alternate to WIDA for those students. We do have students with significant cognitive disabilities, right, who also are English learners. So the assessments we don't have alternates to would be NAEP. NAEP is very specific, and it is specifically measuring students in our core curriculum, and then APPLE is specifically measuring dual language. So we do not have alternate assessments to those. So there's an awesome chart there. Where can you find additional resources? So if you want, you can link on this. We do have alternate assessment participation guidelines. I think I put those on the Padlet. I may be still building out some alternate assessment stuff on your accommodations Padlet, but we do have specific participation guidelines. We have a TA document who is a student with a significant cognitive disability that IEP teams can use. So you're more than welcome to check that out if you're curious. And then we have a couple other links there if you are interested in other resources. But the biggest resource is going to be on the special education assessment webpage. There is an alternate assessment tab, and that's where we house most of all that stuff. So some quick reminders. What do we have going on for alternate assessments right now? We are in the middle of Acadience. So your students with significant cognitive disabilities, or you'll hear, right, our 1% students, or they'll call them our DLM students, they are expected to participate in Acadience. So there is an alternate assessment. It's the same window as Acadience. That data is reported directly into your SIS system under reading on grade level, and then is it math on grade level? So you'll find some information there. There are rubrics on that webpage that teams can use, and they are expected to administer those assessments. So this here will link you to that alternate tab where you can find those Acadience, we call them early literacy and early math alternate assessments. Because we only require grades 1 through 3 at the state level, those are the rubrics we have in place for those students. So you can find information there. There's a Canvas course for teachers on how to administer those assessments. It's pretty simple, and there's some guiding documents. But reach out to me if you have questions. We also have the PEEP alternate assessment. So this one gets a little tricky. Which kids are expected to participate in the PEEP alternate assessment? If you have students with significant cognitive disabilities that are sitting in the classrooms and accessing the program that's receiving the grant funding, which is not maybe necessarily all of those kids. Does that make sense? So if those kids are touching the programming where the grant funding is coming from, they should be doing the PEEP. So it's a handful of kids. Same window. It's a rubric based as well. You can find that information on the PEEP web page, but the PEEP alternate scores, I don't know if you've noticed for PEEP and KEEP, it's similar. When you get into Data Gateway, there's a tab that says PEEP, and then PEEP alternate assessment, keep alternate. You enter those scores in that alternate tab. We do not disaggregate the students amongst both tabs. Does that make sense? So all kindergartners, all preschoolers you'll find in each tab, so you have to go sift out for those kids. But you enter that into Data Gateway. You can find the PEEP stuff on our pre-kindergarten assessment webpage. We house that alternate stuff right there with the regular PEEP materials. Same thing for KEEP, right? You enter those scores into Data Gateway. So that's happening right now. This should be all of your kindergartners, right? And you can find those rubrics on the kindergarten assessment webpage where we house the regular KEEP materials. You look like you're gonna say something. On the assessment,
I did yesterday for keep stuff and I couldn't find it. Assessment website.
should be, so you go to assessment accountability, go to the actual kindergarten tab where you have the KEEP. It should be at the end.
Check again, maybe I was just,
Check again.
maybe I was looking for the word keep.
And in the slides though, Hal, go back, Kim. And Amy should have given you the slide deck. You should be able to click on that assessment webpage and it should take you to the KEEP tab, hopefully. So you can't click on it in your pod, but in the slide deck you can.
Yeah, it's kindergarten tab.
It's kindergarten, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, kindergarten tab. Did I say KEEP? My bad.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, thanks,
labeled
I got it.
kindergarten.
Yeah, so the PEEP and KEEP are housed on the same assessment websites with the other materials. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Actually,
Is it not there?
there's a kindergarten tab and a pre-kindergarten
Yep.
tab.
So that's where,
I was looking for keep, the name of the test.
Right,
rather than-
sorry, kindergarten.
I'm
Yep.
glad it's there.
Okay, dynamic learning maps, or for my new people, you'll hear DLM, right? So we tag it DLM. So that's our alternate assessment that we use for accountability. There is an instructionally embedded window which opens up September 11th and runs through February 23rd. This would be what you would consider maybe like a benchmark or an interim. So if you are an LEA who requires, or you have schools that you know require your students to participate in benchmarks or the interims, you under that IDA are required to have something for your students who require alternate assessments. So DLM instructionally embedded is a great alternate for that. It is aligned to the essential elements. You get immediate progress reporting. It is a fantastic instructional tool. And for my returning assessment directors, you'll notice on the teacher DLM Padlet, I have created a kind of guidance document for using instructionally embedded. I've had a lot of emails already this year from the field wanting to kind of engage in these assessments. So let me know if you need any specific support, but I've added some resources there for you. Those are optional, they're not required, and then you'll notice our spring assessment window, we go back, Kim, just one more, opens up March 11th. So that is our DLM window. So as you guys are getting ready to put your testing plans in place, what I do not recommend doing for DLM is binding your teachers into the same sort of like window that you do for RISE, for example. This can be a very lengthy task. It can take multiple weeks to get through all of this with the nature of some of our students. So I do advise offering that whole window to them. All testing should be completed the week before school's out, right? Is that what it is, Kim? We should not be having students do any testing that last week of school, and definitely not over end of year activities, right? Like that could be a huge violation of a student's faith. So anyway, so that's this year's window. So mark it on your calendars, figure out what you want to do with it, but give your teachers plenty of time. So any of you that have logged into Educator Portal this year, so our new assessment directors, Educator Portal is where we go in DLM to manage teacher accounts, students, rosters, all of those things. So if you are a returning teacher, you'll notice that there is kind of a new layout. There's some new things there, but here's the biggest thing that is new with DLM. the required teacher training that all teachers are required to take prior to administering the test. Any new teacher, there's a new teacher training, returning teachers have a shorter training, but all teachers are required to take DLM's training. There was previously a separate website that they went to for that training, had a separate login. They have now brought that training underneath Educator Portal. That's my chicken with his thumbs up. So this should make everybody super happy out there. So all training is now accessed right in Educator Portal. So this will be a slide or a screenshot or somehow you want to message this to your teachers, especially returning teachers that are used to going to what used to be that Moodle. They log in to Educator Portal, click their yep, I accept security agreement, and then you'll see that training tab now. And they click on that and their training course should drop in and they just do it right there, all within one login now, which is super awesome. Okay, what do you need to do for DLM right now? What if they are new SPED teachers? How do they get the username and password? Awesome, Carrie. So what you need to do is make sure that you guys as assessment directors, usually what I recommend is assessment directors and special ed directors have access to DLM as a district test coordinator, or at least designate somebody, right? A coordinator or someone to kind of take that role. So we want to make sure that we do have someone in your district that is holding that district test coordinator role. And then we want to get new teachers enrolled. So, so you can go ahead and add a new teacher. Go ahead, Kim, what's the next slide? I think, yeah, so cleaning up teacher accounts, I couldn't remember what I did. So what you can do is you can get new teacher accounts added. There is a DLM district test coordinator Padlet that I believe I linked in the end here. You don't have to go there yet, Kim. So in there is a document that walks you through how adding new teachers, setting up rosters. So that's how you'll add those teachers. When you add a new user into DLM, it sends them an activation email from Kite Support, and then that's how they get their username and they set up their own password. But usernames are always a teacher's full email address. So the other thing you want to start looking at is hopefully by next week we start loading students, right, and that automated. So make sure sometimes your special ed departments will not send Scram records. Our first official SPED count is in October. So talk to your special ed people. When are they going to start sending those active Scram records through? But I cannot get students loaded. We won't pick them up until we have an active Scram record and we have the 1% flag set. Does that make sense? Otherwise, in the meantime, we see those students as gen ed students, and so they'll start loading into our gen ed assessments. Yes, there was a question.
Yeah, the question online. What if they are new SPED teachers? How do they get username and password?
So I just answered that. So they'll create a new account and it should send them an activation email. But if you still have questions, email me and I can walk you through that. The other thing.
Just a time check for all of us, because it's not just you. We've got some other presentations. We've got 38 minutes and about 65 slides.
Okay, clean up teacher accounts. So that's the other thing. Get rid of old teachers. If you go to the next slide, Kim, you'll notice that there's two buttons. It's called, you've got deactivating a teacher, which is typically what we did. You'll notice there's a new one that says removing a teacher now. What's the difference between the two? How do I know what to use? You want to deactivate a teacher if Sally's going to stay in your school, but she no longer, like she doesn't need to have a DLM account this year. Maybe she doesn't have students this year, but maybe next year. So deactivate her if she's staying within your school. Remove Sally if she's no longer a teacher for you. She's retired. She's moved schools. Remove her. Does that make sense? Okay, if you go to add a teacher and you get the message that they already exist in another organization, you have to email me. I am the one that can help move them over. So there's information here on that as well. And then go ahead, next slide. Score reports are also in. Okay, I think what does law say? Is it 6 weeks, 3 weeks? What is 3 weeks? After score reports are in, you're supposed to get them out. Score reports are delivered the first part of August. Please get those to your teachers, make a plan, get them out. You can find them in Educator Portal, which is why you need to make sure you have somebody with a district login to access those. I see you, Hal, hold on. Teachers have access to student score reports once students are rostered to them.
When do the results annually kind of get posted in the data files so I can schedule it out?
So score reports delivered down to educator portal in August, and then they should be in your CERF file the same time you get all the other stuff. We actually get DLM's data
Earlier, right?
in like July. It's like one of our first, we get it pretty much immediately. So it's there, we have it, we're loading it, it's being housed. So it's going through all that data warehouse right now. But you don't get score reports until it's usually like August 1st
Is there any timeline that'll speed up from
to get actual score reports.
testing in May to August? Is there any by the vendor to do that different?
Not at the time. It's something we can talk about, but as far as getting actual score reports, no. And part of it is because our window doesn't close until June. So we could look about the timeline to close the window earlier. If we wanted to close the window in the first part of May, we might be able to speed that up, but it's how we set our windows. So if that's something we want to consider, we can have that conversation moving into next year, Hal.
Just one voice, but
Yeah.
it's a long timeline.
But yeah. Okay. And then becoming familiar with all your DL1 pages. So that was kind of a lot of to-do lists. It's in the slides. Please let me know. There is DLM District Test Coordinator training has been scheduled for October 23rd, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We will record it if you cannot get there. I posted on that DLM District Test Coordinator Padlet, but please join us, especially if you're new. DLM teacher trainings, regional trainings have also been set. I have 9. I am going much further across the state, many more times with DLM trainings this year. So please get teachers registered, and there's your links to your Padlets. And you'll also find all the training information in the district coordinator Padlet. I put that Midas course registration up in there too. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. It was a lot.
All right, here we go. Rita. I know that there are a lot of questions right now about ELs. Please do not hesitate to email us. Emails are on the first slide and the last slide. So just a couple of tips. Just remember, communicate with everybody. I can't tell you how many emails we have sent out to different listservs, and I still get emails like, oh, we kind of heard this through rumor. We try to hit everybody, but oh my, just when in doubt, just blast it out, please. So it's good. I know, right? I just made that up on the fly. This is what Little Sleep does, dealing with ESSA. Just remember that throughout the year, looking at the year, in an overview, screeners are happening all year round, but most heavily in the fall as schools are starting up. Then always in the winter is going to be our RETA access window. Our alternate access window is the exact same time. Just like Tracy said earlier, please do not try to squeeze all access testing into just 6 weeks. This is a test that it does require time. We want to make sure that all students have the opportunity to test. So when you're putting your assessment, submitting your assessment plans, please keep that whole window open for your educators to get it done and completed. And again, if you are a new AD, contact me. Happy to set up your accounts for you. We do have to, at the state level, set up your accounts. Once you have your accounts, though, you are going to have a plethora of responsibilities. I'm getting a little anxiety just looking at this list that I've provided for you, so I apologize right now. But you get to create accounts for everyone within your LEA. For both WIDA accounts. Again, you're going to have 2 different accounts. Please monitor tests, monitor trainings that your test administrators are doing. You need to complete the data validation.
Standardize your home language survey, please.
Yeah, we're gonna go over that really soon. One thing that Maureen gave you a little sneak peek into, we're gonna do 2 pre-ID files this year. Our typical one in, I know, yay! Typical one in early winter, so end of October-ish, beginning of November, and then the second one, you guys are gonna have to add tons of new students. Second one, coming just the week before testing opens. Woo! I know! All right. This is what Six Sigma does for us.
That's a what?
Six Sigma, as Darren was mentioning earlier. So it's exciting. So, and of course, just communicate, please. WIDA access reports are available in the data gateway. There were some weird wonky things happening. We never figured out why, but we have pressure tested it. It is all working. Huzzahs were all around once it finally worked. So yay, they're available. Make sure, and part of communication, your LEAs in all schools have a data gateway keeper, the person in charge of all of the data gateway for that school. Make sure those people are updating the accounts every year for data gateway, because I can't tell you how many times people are like, I can't get into the data gateway and see anything. And I'm like, talk to your data gateway keeper. I don't know who it is for LEAs. I'm making up lots of names today. Sorry. WIDA screener reminders based on 3 updated. We're gonna get there. Home language questions. Please note, I've gotten this question so many times. Entrance criteria has not changed. Our entrance criteria still remains an overall composite of 5.0 or higher. So if a student gets a 4.9 or lower, they qualify for language services. The 5.0 or higher means, guess what? You are proficient. Go forth and educate. Grade level clusters are in the TAM. That says page 13. And honestly, I think it's more 15, 16, but the grade clusters are down there on this slide. You have 30 calendar days from the first day of the school year to get kiddos screened. And then after the first month, it is 10 school days. Okay, so that language did change a little. It is 10 school days. All right. Training courses. I've sent out lots of AD memos about this. Screener trainings are still available. There's lots of little videos to help walk test administrators through the changes in WIDA AMS, the test administration platform. All other trainings will be available again online in the WIDA Secure Portal starting September 1st. So again, magic date, September 1st. Everything is going to be updated for trainings to reflect AMS. And then further training opportunities that we would really love you all to communicate out. This is this year's menu of offerings. We will still have all the self-paced workshops available. Our very first one is going to be in person. Thank you, Granite School District, for allowing us to use your facilities to bring this to you. Interpreting access for ELL score reports for instruction. So this will not just be learning about the score reports, but it's going to be then what, right? We will follow that up with nurturing speaking growth. We will have access for ELLs and then alternate access webinars for test administrators. I really highly suggest you attend these because so many changes took place in WIDA AMS. Navigating it's going to feel like new, but also the alternate access was updated as well. So there will be changes to that as well if you're a test administrator. And then our final one will be scaffolding learning through language, and that will be a series of webinars. Here we go, dates. Again, tiny little chart. Again, I highlighted when to expect that second upload. We have our test window. We really try to be conscientious about that test window for really when you're going to receive materials. Schools are coming back after breaks. Do note that materials are going to be delivered the 3rd and the 4th of January. So start to make plans now to have people there to receive, because they do have to be signed for. And then your data validation, all of that is here. We, as we get closer, we're going to give you more reminders, in-depth information on how to go through all of these steps. All right. Here we go. The home language survey. Please note that with your slides this morning, Amy sent a ton of attachments. There were 3 pertaining to all of this for the next couple of slides. Home language survey questions have now been updated. The 5 that you see on the screen and also that you see reflected, we have given you an updated home language survey as well. Those are now the new questions, and we hope that these questions help eliminate confusion. How did you have a?
I was like, this is for my Title III director, right? Not me. How to do this.
Well, this is what's going to identify kids that need to be screened. So, yeah.
So that's if the assessment.
Alan is off the hook. I don't know if everyone out there in Zoom is.
Closely,
But
yeah.
please talk to your technology, your SIS, all the people. There are a couple of things on that home language survey that is attached that also were made for Title III and Title I law. And part of that you have to do. So if this is part of your SIS online registration, you have to make sure that parents know if their student is identified as EL after they are screened, they will have the opportunity to opt out. They can't opt out yet because they haven't been qualified, but you do need to ensure that is communicated with parents in their preferred language as well. So, home language survey. Entrance procedures, we did talk about, again, it changed to 10 school days. One thing to be aware of, this is also a change. In the past, we used to have a 2-year rule with screeners. If a student's been gone for 2 years or less from a Utah school, they do not have to be rescreened. If it was 2 years or more, they did have to be rescreened. Now, it is if they leave and come back just within 2 different school years. So if they leave within the same school year and come back to Utah schools, they don't have to be screened. But if they leave this year and then come back next school year, they would have to be screened again. So there is another change. Exit criteria. Oh, the fun one. Okay, so exit criteria is now an overall composite of a 4.2 or higher, and speaking of 3.5 or higher. If the student doesn't meet both of those criteria, they do not exit. I've had people come up with really creative, what if we combine the 5.0 with this and that? Nope, it's one or the other. There's no, let's combine and make it work. So this is going to be the only year based on the 23 access scores. So the test that was just taken, 23 spring access scores that you can apply both exit criteria. And it's going to be one or the other. You were asked to exit students based on the 5.0 in the spring. And now that we have our verbal approval from U.S. Department of Education and direction from our superintendency, you can now exit students that also meet this criteria, our new updated criteria. There is also in the email sent an updated exit letter please note, one big question is, and this is going to be big for your Title III, so make sure you're all communicating. Part of the law requires a parent-teacher-student conference to take place within 30 days of exiting to ensure they have a good education plan moving forward into their 4 years of monitoring. And that's actually always been in the law, but we are finding lots of schools have not actually been doing that. We've also seen a lot of schools and heard that a lot are not sending out annual notification letters. That is also per law, Title I law, actually. Those things need to be taking place. So, again, I really, in the attachment, I sent a lot of detailed information about this in the attachments. Please reach out to myself or Ann Michelle Neal if you have questions. Your exit letters, they need to be sent within 30 days. So I believe Ann Michelle and I, we determined that it can be 30 days from the beginning of the school year. And then also, we did say that the parent-student-teacher conference, if you complete those by your fall conferences, if you want to do those in tandem, even if it's not within those 30 days, we're going to consider if you have made those attempts to initiate the process within 30 days, letting them know we will meet with you in the fall to discuss your students' plan moving forward through monitoring. We'll allow that for this year because all these changes are coming down right when things are crazy at the beginning of the year. Please remember monitoring. When a student is in monitoring, they are not considered EL anymore. They are considered fluent. They're not in active services. If a student, if it is deemed through lots of data, observation, documentation that the student might actually have an academic English language barrier that still exists, you will need to actually start the whole process over. You cannot just re-enter them into services. You need to do this in consultation with the parents, and you would have to start from the beginning with a screener. That was a lot. Here, email me. And now, Michelle.
All right, for RISE, this is just a quick promotional slide for the training that will be held on September 13th. The MIDAS course is listed there for your ease of enrolling. And just as a heads up for those of you who are hoping for guidance for remote proctoring, this won't have it. But please still attend this one because it has all the other things. There will be a remote proctoring training specific that happens in following weeks. As a reminder, all of the guides for RISE, your TIDE user guide, the TAM, as well as the reporting guide are all on the Utah RISE portal under resources. This is also a great time if you have not to check on your secure browsers. All secure browser information has been sent out in the last few AD memos to get things updated there. And if you are not subscribed for updates yet, you can do that also from the portal. I've highlighted that there at the bottom. Make sure that you add your testing windows, especially for summative and TIDE, so that as teachers start to log in for benchmarks and interims, they are not misadministering those summative assessments.
There is an update this year, though. If they try to do that and try to give a summative test, they literally have to type in that they are giving a summative test. They actually have to type the word summative now. So when it's not in the system quite yet, but yes, administration of summative RISE test is going to be much more difficult, even without testing windows set.
It is on there now.
Oh, is it good? Is it there? Fine.
On there, and you not only have to type a sentence, you also have to check a box.
Yes. And you have to type summative, the word summative.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multi-steps now, so we're trying to save as much of your resets as possible for all of you. So there you go.
As your teachers and administrators are logging in for the new school year, please remember that the first time they log in, they will click the little option at the bottom that says first time logging in this school year to do the password reset. The nice thing is if they're clicking this themselves, they see that they have that little 15-minute window. But go ahead and go to the next slide. As you're creating accounts for teachers, that 15-minute window also still applies. So when you create those accounts, a little heads up for teachers is kind of nice so that they know that they'll be receiving an email. This is a great time to go in and clean up those accounts. We are already seeing requests for teachers to have their Cactus IDs released from a previous LEA. So if you haven't done that yet, this is a great time to start. And if you are checking on teacher accounts and you notice that it is still linked to another LEA, please don't hesitate to reach out to that previous LEA and they can release that. If you're having trouble contacting them, you're welcome to contact me and I can help you with that as well. The one thing I cannot do is if there are email issues, like if there was a typo in the email or if the teacher email has changed, whether it be a name change or a site change, something like that, you will need to contact the RISE help desk with those requests. These are your dates of availability for benchmark modules as well as interims. I added these because math is different. The math benchmarks and interims have been updated to provide some more standard specific information, and so those are not scheduled to be available to teachers until September 19th, but still with the same end dates as the others. And that is, again, that is math specific. Your ELA and science have been available since August 1st. For summative, the windows are there available. For remote administration for summative RISE testing, please note this is available for ELA and math only. Science is not available for remote administration. So for those of you who have been hoping for that remote administration, you are getting it for a couple of our content areas. But also understand that remote administration is only available for students who have received 100% of their instruction in an online environment, not 90% of their instruction in an online environment. And again, that remote summative administrative training, it will be TBA. Just watch the AD memo as that will come out probably in the next couple of weeks. I would anticipate as we start moving forward to be ready for mid-year summative administration.
According to RISE, it should be CAMBI and remote administration for ELA and math should be available November 1st.
Wow.
So for RISE. So.
Rachel, I see your question. Do we have an idea when summative science will be available for remote administration? Is that never? Is it currently never?
I would say never. We just have
It just isn't on the timeline?
We have some barriers with that we still need to overcome, and part of it is item development. It's a longer term. It's still in our roadmap. That could just keep all of the tests available for remote proctoring for the students who are receiving their instruction.
Okay, thank you. For UTIPS, this will be the training that is coming up in just a couple of weeks. It is August 31st. Also, you can register in Midas. And this is a big fat plug here because this is where the high school benchmarks are now going to be housed. They are going to look a little bit different than they did in the Pearson system, so just kind of be aware of that. But I am hopeful to have some guidance for you in this UTIPS training on how to administer those high school benchmarks if you are choosing to use those. For any of our new ADs, UTIPS is a tool that's available for any educator, K through 12. There's an item bank that's available. They can also create their own assessments, which is really nice. It syncs with your school's SIS system, so students don't need to be added. However, teacher accounts do need to be added. And in this training, I will show LEAs and those admin level people how to add those teacher accounts so you can get any new teachers added or verify old teacher accounts. For example, even just this week, I've had teachers contact me and say, I really love a UTIPS account. And I go in there and they actually have one. It just hasn't been accessed since 2013. So some of them are there and you just need to reset their password and send them on their way. For Apple, for dual immersion students, that training is going to be held September 26th. If you are looking at this and going, oh, I don't work with dual immersion testing, that's great, but please communicate this with the people who do. So if you're in a larger LEA and you're going, oh, well, I have a DLI coordinator who takes care of all of this, pass this information along to them so that that DLI coordinator can attend this training in your place if this is not one of your responsibilities under your assessment director umbrella. For the DLI assessment, it is for grades 3 through 9. I've included some links here on how to manage teacher accounts, as well as our Apple Utah webpage and some other helpful videos. The window is up there. One of the things I want to draw attention to is that we have some non-DLI schools who administer Apple outside of what we would consider our Utah DLI window. Some people do it in the spring. It's important to note that that is not my area of expertise. So I am DLI school specific in the fall window. And then for Utah Aspire Plus, that training will be in the winter, so it's not scheduled yet. Because we don't need to worry about it until March. So there you go. Remote administration will also be available for Utah Aspire Plus, anticipated for all content areas, again, for students who have been receiving their instruction 100% online. And I know this is going to get a little bit wishy-washy because you might have a student who still takes driver's ed at a brick and mortar school, but that's the only thing they take. But that's not 100% online. So something to think about.
Okay, so time check again, we've got, was it 9 minutes? 10 minutes left and about 40 slides. So we want to just.
So I need to speed read?
Well,
Speed talk?
get on the-
Okay.
So get out the content, and pick out the things.
As I say, the big thing with PEEP is that rostering should be going through for next week. So I was assured that it would be there for Friday, on Friday, that it would be going through. So that's the big thing for KEEP. Everything else you can read in there. For KEEP, if you are having issues with rostering, please check your SIS and UTREX submissions because that is the only thing that I know of that is preventing people from rostering into the KEEP assessment. So just a reminder that it is required for all LEAs per board rule change this last May. So everybody should be giving the KEEP this year, and then that will be determined what kindergarten assessment we will be doing. We're taking it to committee this month, and it should be before the full board in September. So we will keep you updated if there's any change. For Acadians, Whitney has
the first couple.
the first few.
So just we'll speed through these. So the first ones, you can see the dates there. So what the window is, and then the due dates for data and parent notifications and all of that is there. And the board rule is attached, so you can see that these dates do come straight from board rule. And the next two slides are just the checklist for beginning of year testing windows. The main things, if somebody is administrating or scoring the reading or math Acadience assessments, they do have to have received the essentials training. There is the Acadience, the Canvas course for math that is a refresher course. So if it's been a while, the refresher course is there. We recommend doing some shadow scoring or checking the scoring just to ensure accuracy with the scoring. And then on the next page, just a couple of things. Make sure your materials are ready to go. Make sure assessment manuals have been reviewed. Accounts within the data entry system are created and ready. Maureen talked about the ADM. That should be ready to go next week with the rostering. And the Amplify one should be working now. So we know there's been issues, but by next week, all of that should be cleared up. And then just going through the rest of that checklist.
Yes, Amplify has rostered. So if you're having issues, again, check your SIS and UTREX because probably errors in your system. I just replied to an email and said that exact same thing. So just, yeah. Just a reminder about those Acadience reading requirements. Please make sure that you are notifying parents, that you're administering that diagnostic assessment to any student who's below grade level, providing interventions, and then progress monitoring at those required rates. Invalidations, there's your reasons to invalidate. Please send that information to either Jared or I if you do invalidate a reading or math assessment. And then we just have our beginning of the year data analysis trainings available. This is
covers reading and math because the way we analyze data is the same and it doesn't change if we change the subject. So we're going to provide those for teachers a couple dates and then for school leaders a couple dates. And then I am offering a couple of dates for training for school leaders or coaches on making sure you're setting up a progress monitoring plan in your school to really help ensure that you're moving that literacy forward and providing that intervention instruction that students need. Then there are some Acadience reading resources here. I have created a Padlet that really does have pretty much everything you need to know about Acadience reading. It includes training information, links to manuals, accommodations, just anything resource. Please go to that Padlet and utilize that.
Okay, and then math also has a Padlet with all of the Acadience math resources. There's some resources that Jared and I have created around response pattern analysis that kind of condenses the information that Acadience provided. And then there's also some spreadsheets or Google Sheets that we've had different LEAs submit to us to track overall class performance. So there's a couple of those that you can check out on there. And then we've had some questions about becoming a Acadience mentor in either reading or math. If you are a mentor, that means that you are certified to provide official Acadience workshops and trainings. In order to become a reading or math mentor, you have to first do the essentials training for reading or math, then the data interpretation workshop, and then the Acadience provided mentoring workshop. So there are the 3 workshops that have to be completed, and then you have to pass an assessment at the end of the mentoring workshop. You can go to Acadience's training site to get all of those workshops and have that. And then on the next slide, we could say, should we skip this due to time or, yeah.
You can throw it out.
Yeah. You can throw the questions out.
We did just have a question come in. They're up there very tiny, but about how you are training new teachers. So if you want to throw this in the chat or up on the board really quick about how you're training new teachers and making sure that any paras or new teachers are trained to administer Acadience math, and are you providing a stipend for the teachers to attend those required trainings if it's outside of contract hours? So we had an AD reach out to us with these questions and we said we'd throw it up. And here's a few. Are on Zoom, go ahead and throw your answers in the chat, or you can hurry and put them up.
Can't move the slide if they're answering.
I did try and go fast.
So did I.
Hey, Scotty, you're
Okay, so in the 3 minutes we got left, here's everything ACT. Hopefully you know how to read. Big news here though, you're in advance warning. Next school year, we're going all online for regular testing here in Utah. There will be no more regular paper tests. So not this year, but next year.
That's not this year.
We said it could have been this year, could have been next. After discussing with ACT, we could have pushed it really hard and gone all online. We didn't think that would be fair. So we didn't mess that
Show
up.
that to my high schools that I told everybody was doing one.
Everyone
You're gonna be
is out there.
pros.
Yeah, I look like a liar.
No.
Very good for the absolutely have.
Yep. So, you know, if you get a chance, if you're still doing paper, this is your last chance to kind of get ahead of the pack because once everyone goes online, it's not just Utah, it's happening across for the other 23 states that test all their juniors. It's going to get busy on those helplines. It is. So for the ACT pilot, since I'm going to notify as we get closer to 9:15, I'm going to notify you now. 9/7, we're actually going to have a training that Friday, I believe at 9 a.m. in the morning for those who signed up for the ACT pilot. And that pilot's going to launch officially September 15th. If you sign up in advance, I'll be the one sending you out the email for that. ACT Now is launching November 6th. That information will get uploaded from the org file, which you should see soon from Emily. And please return that quickly. And we'll be announcing some trainings with the new ACT Now system and how that works. This is the new Utah specific information page link. And notice that it says 1, 2, and 3 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's simplified, which we absolutely adore. I have been going through here looking at all of the links, making sure they work, making sure they're accurate, because we have found a couple of errors. And I was actually surprised at how well they've simplified a lot of things down to the training video staff link, informational videos. I sat there going, wow, I could do that. Oh, wow, I could do that. I could do that even. And so it looks like this is going to be a lot easier overall. We're going to skip the overview video, but feel free to take a look at that overview video. It's also on the page. It's a pretty good overview of ACT Now. All of our testing manuals are going to be online. ACT is not sending those out, so only print what you need. No need to secure, destroy. They're public facing. There's nothing secure in those, but they're easy to search PDFs. I really have enjoyed lately when I go to need to find information in any of these manuals. I just put in a couple keywords when I do like Control F on the PDF, and it takes me right to what I need. So that's been actually really nice also. And I just updated you. We got the new website. It's up and running, and we'll get some more information up for you soon. I got some information on ACT use in Utah universities. ACT dug this out for us. A lot of it goes back to scholarships and class placement, but there was one school I think that is still using it or looking at it for admissions. I just don't remember which one. And so, and I was surprised to find out Brigham Young University doesn't require it, but Brigham Young University in Hawaii does. That was weird. And so math and class placements were a big one. And then also with like if kids were homeschooled or went to a non-accredited private school, they'll have to use their ACT scores. But so I got that information there if you want to peruse that.
this to you?
ACT helped dig this up, and I've been on some of these websites and verified. Actually, was a good with the information they sent me, I was able to go check some of the
What
websites.
does, I thought, AccuPlace or other tests that young men and women can take for math placement.
There are other tests they can take, but if you have the ACT score, it'll help you get your placement done sooner. And I remember having to go to school my first week, not being able to get my schedule flushed, and having to take a placement test. And then I couldn't get the class because it was full, right? I mean, that happens too, right? Especially your first year.
This is just some information, how kind of to the point, what you said earlier is how much, usage is ACT and, how does that impact students? This is information you can share with parents and students to get their buy-in of why it could still be beneficial to them.
So anyway, so the information's there. I guess before I put it in here, I was actually clicking on different links, checking out the different schools. Like some of them, like they say it's good for scholarships and they'll give you the first scholarship, but then you need to apply, get the stuff in, and then they'll send you the information to see which other scholarship you might have applied for. If you're not using Schmoop, please use Schmoop because we paid for it. The new magic word of the year is honey. Go Utah with honey. But we have a new project manager with Schmoop, Kelsey Olson. She's fantastic. If you need any help with anything, setting up your schools, setting up your teachers or getting logged in with your own account, just drop her an email. She's very happy to help out. There's a webinar on the 6th. There's a link to register on that if you want to see that webinar on September 6th on everything Schmoop. But it's a fantastic test prep program. I had someone contact me asking, do we have a test prep test for ACT? I said, no, we have Schmoop where the kids can take it 4 or 5 times throughout the year, starting in 8th grade. So I think I covered everything pretty quick and left a little bit, maybe a minute for Jessica.
Yeah, we just have an upcoming webinar for accommodations on September 7th. And then, yeah, that's good. That's really it. I mean, that's the upcoming training before we get in. And then just some information for AP exams for those who's irrelevant. The deadline this year is January 18th for accommodations. And there's links to AP information. And Kirsty Schreck is a specialist at USBE over that. If you have any accessibility questions, you can contact me.
All right, thank you. Load of information. Again, use the PowerPoint slides that we send out as a reference point. We thank you for your time today and for the good work that you're doing. I want to thank the Assessment Kimberly staff for preparing this information and working to achieve our mission of supporting each of you in your roles and your own. So thank you and have a wonderful day.